So hey anime fans, the series name is What If Naruto Was the Most Dangerous Criminal in the MHA Universe? So let's start the series. It was a rather average day in Mustafu, not much out of the ordinary besides the occasional villainous deed and the cliché heroic chase. A society run by humans with developed mutations known as quirks, these people held the largest part of the world's population at 80%. Though these mutations seemed powerful in their own right, only few held the title of hero. The use of the elements, strength and speed beyond human comprehension, healing abilities, conductive abilities, and anything you could think of in a quirk, someone had it. Some applications of one's quirk were substantially better than others, therefore placing them higher in society on whether their quirks were more suited to their occupation. In this void of need, heroes were developed around the world to apprehend those who used such abilities for their own selfish desires. Adults and children alike adored these famed figures, positioning them amongst the elitists of their individual countries, though to one blonde-haired teenager, heroes using their fame and fortune as driving forces of their careers was as despicable as their villain counterparts. This platitude society only birthed more villains to fit the social agenda, because what would heroes be needed for if there was no villains to combat? If that wasn't enough, there were thousands of hero schools across the globe. It was legally stated that citizens needed to go to hero school in order to earn their rights to use their quirk in public. Nevertheless, usage of one's quirk without permission by law was illegal with a potential chance of jail time to a certain extent. Japan was home to one of these hero schools, UA High. UA was said to be the best hero school in all of the world, with every child coming from middle school who thought themselves to be the best, tried for their chance to be inducted into said institution. They had 4 definitive courses for the best of these students depending on where they fit best: Hero Course, Support Course, General Education Course, and the Business Course. Naruto Uzumaki was not one of these students nor heroes, but his reason for heading in the direction of the famous high school was strictly out of firm curiosity. A curiosity that might be related to an incident that occurred a few days before. Flashback, 5 days before. At one of the busiest intersections in downtown Mustafu, a girl had recently developed her quirk at the age of 4 and was unable to control her recently discovered powers. Loud sirens and numerous car alarms went off as the street rippled in waves, leaving a little girl sat crying in the epicenter. Vehicles and citizens alike were tossed in random directions as the black concrete continued to send rubble and objects towards bystanders. As people ran in cries of fear, trying to evade the rippling waves of demolition, heroes arrived on the scene. As such, they tried their best to get towards the girl without further alarming her and continuing said destruction. "I can't get close," the hero, Power Loader, exclaimed, destroying the rubble sent his way. "Where's Kamui?" Another hero screamed over the sound of a small car sailing overhead. A blonde-haired, blue-eyed teenager stood to the side out of harm's way, dressed in his usual middle school garb with a plain white tee. The dusty breeze drifted chaotically, blowing his loosely spiked hair over his oceanic orbs. He was pretty tall for his age at 5 feet 10 inches and lean, but muscular build under his clothing, which one would presume he trained vigorously for. Of all things today, he presumed to be a rather boring turnout considering how mediocre his life was, but this was something not as dull as he would have thought. Seeing the heroes on scene panic at the turn of events and the viciousness of the girl's quirk only furthered his interest. Even Power Loader, who was famous for his tech, couldn't even budge an inch with all the random objects being thrown his way. It was sort of embarrassing if he said so himself. Heroes unable to perform their duties because of a 4-year-old girl innocently releasing her power. He would probably be able to get close with his quirk, but he wasn't sure if it would stop the ensuing chaos. It's pathetic, honestly. Without thinking about the consequences he'd bring upon himself, he flashed next to the small girl. Yes, his quirk was extremely powerful and his control was in the same league. Under his quirk registration when he was younger, he had defined his quirk as teleportation. But that wasn't the only acclamation to his ability. Within a range of 5 kilometers, he could flash anywhere he could see, and within a blink he'd reappear at said location. Within that time frame, the world around him would slow for a second, allowing him to perform an action and witness the entirety of his surroundings. Even with such a high speed, tunnel vision was supposed to occur based on the natural physics of aggressive motion, but he had none, though he always chalked it up to being a part of his power. As he closed in on the girl, he extended his arms to pick her up under the shoulder, hypothesizing that contact with something besides her arms resulted in her quirk usage. With his hands under her armpits, he pulled her into his arms and flashed again to the location of the heroes, hoping to put her in custody of a hero without revealing his face to the public. He was a private person and liked to be by himself, so keeping his face away from media was all he wanted. Posing for the media was for troublesome women. Someone had shown him there was another way to help others and himself without confrontation. Within this time frame, he slid Power Loader away from the last approaching debris, leaving him with fun-sized parting gift. It was always a mesmerizing sight watching the brief stagnant motion of others when using his quirk, sweat dripping slowly from faces, features of one's face twisted in a certain motion, objects passively sitting in a calm and blank state. This moment was what made his quirk the best. Without allowing the hero to see him, he flashed away once more. As he faded, the streets grew quiet. The destructive force of the new quirk user miraculously disappeared, leaving the tech teacher for UA holding the sobbing tot in the fold of his armor. Seeing this scene, many citizens viewing from a safe distance yelled out in relief and praise for the tech hero. "What the hell? Did you see that?" One middle-aged man screamed. "Power Loader has done the impossible. UA's hero tech is becoming unbelievingly amazing. How did he even do that?" A female reporter sprouted as her cameraman faced her awestruck face. During the mayhem, the mechanical exoskeleton hero was the most confused of all. "That was incredible. Is that some new relief gadget or something?" Another hero on scene approached him. "No, believe me, I wish I had support items capable of magically saving people out of thin air." Saying so, the hero looked down at the girl in front of him, still crying silently asking for her mom. "Let's get the girl back to whoever is on scene for her. It's okay, little one, we'll find your mommy." Power Loader cradled the girl as he jogged off towards the police barrier holding back the cheering citizens. The hero smiled and waved seeing the people of Mustafu. The praise was nice, if nothing else. A few hours later, nobody on site has any explanation as to a credited save of the girl. We came to a conclusion that perhaps another hero had been stationed near our sector. But the quirk listings of nearby heroes don't match the capabilities needed to fulfill such a rescue. The hero explained his findings, however. The assumption that someone who wasn't a registered hero saved the girl was embarrassing and shameful. A few heroes sat around a table meant for those who were the best of the Mustafa sector. Most of these people were UA teachers given jurisdiction over that prefecture. Gun hero, Snipe was the first to speak. So a potential non-hero used their quirk to save the surrounding citizens and the little girl. All this within the blink of an eye. This is troubling. Midnight, the 18 hero followed. While such an impressive ability, naked to the senses, how magnificent and terrifying at the same time, some of the members nodded their head, although reluctant considering her tone of voice. One member in the room stayed quiet as the others conversed and started to play the recording of the incident. Shoyuta Aizawa, known as Eraserhead and a teacher of UA, narrowed his eyes at the description of the presumed ability. "Wait, did you see that? Stop the video at 0:11 and look at the far left of the screen. That blonde kid disappears into thin air, slowing it down at the point." The member's eyes widened at barely being able to catch the person on screen. Dressed in a black blazer with flowing bright blonde hair, Aizawa was sure now, however, under different circumstances he wished he could have found the boy after his first encounter. "I know who that is," the black-haired man said, drawing the other heroes to his insomniac features. "Oh, just who could this handsome young man be?" Midnight asked with a sultry smile. Aizawa kept his stoicism, ignoring his colleague as usual. "Naruto Uzumaki, age 15, I encountered him many months ago. While he was doing some unsavvy things, I erased his quirk and we fought for a bit." The group grew into an uncomfortable silence. Matching Aizawa in combat was almost unheard of, as the black-haired man was extremely reliable when it came down to combat without quirks. He was one of the best in the business of heroes at doing so. Snipe flipped to a page of the National Quirk Registry and flipped it towards the middle of the table. Teleportation? The Uzumaki boy should have graduated weeks ago. What is he not doing at a hero's school with such an ability? The masked man asked the eraser hero, who was still recovering from an attack on the USJ. Aizawa sighed and turned his head to the screen, now showing a headshot of the boy. Naruto was lazily looking at the camera with half-lidded eyes. He believes heroes to be posers, or some of us Uzumaki said he believes heroes are the ones who operate in the dark to provide stability for the top heroes. His response was met with a few appraising looks. Even Shoyuta had an unnoticeable gleam in his eye. I had planned to bring him to UA, but he evaded me for months and I've never been able to catch him off guard again. This may be risky, but as an UA employee, I believe we should take the chance to reach out to him, before he goes an alternate path, Aizawa said with his low monotone voice. For the first time, the UA principal spoke. Aizawa-kun, you said he was caught in the act once before, therefore, before I share my opinion, what was the occurrence? Nisa said in a carefree voice, sitting short in stature. The boy was hired to be the getaway on a bank heist in the 2E sector at Cavalry International in October. I caught him before the offenders made their way to him, and we fought. He said he needed the money to pay rent after being dropped from the government's legal plan for orphans. He was acting out of desperation, so I made a judgment call. We talked after all suspects were arrested, and he wasn't very forthcoming with information. Supposedly he's been in and out of orphanages since the day he was born and lived with the bare necessities. He reminded me of myself in a way and I was particularly fond of him. But he vanished before I was able to help further. Eraser had told the story, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. Many whispered to themselves as he finished, especially after saying he was fond of someone. Nisa stood on his seat and smiled. That is very against your character, Aizawa, but I must say I'm intrigued. I'll accept your judgment. He'll be accepted into the general education course if we can locate him. In the meantime, get a hold of the boy through the government directory and extend the invitation as a token of faith. Either that or Koyama can try her luck. The 18-only hero seductively smirked in Shuta's direction, colorfully displaying her interest in such a prospect of her Gen Ed class. The underground hero sighed before nodding. Are you absolutely certain about this, Nisa? He used his quirk illegally, no matter if he saved lives, plus, we have no knowledge of his previous whereabouts. This will undoubtedly come back to haunt us. Snipe added his thoughts, getting many nods of agreement. The principal chuckled. Oh, don't worry about all the trivial matters. I do everything for a reason, you see. I believe a golden opportunity has come our way. After his statement, the heroes quickly shuffled onto the UA Sports Festival security measures. After the recent attack on the USJ, they were expectantly weary for another similar occurrence. Flashback end. Naruto strode slowly through the gates of UA, admiring the incredible architecture and luxurious facilities. Plus, it wasn't every day someone got to leisurely stroll through one of the best hero schools in the world. Students and faculty stared at him as he wandered, trying to find his way through the labyrinth of hallways. He was the odd man out as he wasn't wearing a uniform and was wearing a mask over the bridge of his nose. The blonde was guessing that his presence was disturbing for some after being recently attacked by the League of Villains. It also didn't help that he had no idea where he was going. Out of nowhere, a student with glasses and a sturdy form about his height with dark blue hair marched up to him. You there? Boy in the blazer, it is not acceptable to be on campus without a uniform. I will have to take you to campus security as it is against student policy. The teenager scolded, chopping his forearms back and forth. As he approached the Uzumaki to take him away, a caressing hand touched him on the shoulder. Oh, no worries, Ida-kun, this one is with me. I'll take him from here. Ingenium's brother saluted at the Gen Ed teacher, Midnight, though he narrowed his specs at the blonde briefly before taking off. The blue-eyed teenager gazed boringly at the woman before him. It wasn't like he was a stranger to the female form. Although the 18 hero could be considered a cut above the rest, she smiled cheekily at him, pushing her left arm under her bust as she did so. Naruto watched the fast boy sprint off, comically kicking up dust from a clean floor. He returned his attention lazily to the women in front of him, standing with a hand on her hip. You must be Naruto. I'll take you to Principal Nizu. I could see you were struggling with direction. She giggled a little, trying to draw a smile or something out of the stoic boy. Seeing no reaction, she pouted and turned heel, motioning him to follow. No fun. My charms always work on boys your age, she added with a swing of her hips and slow look over her shoulder as they began walking through the crowds of students. To her surprise, the boy cast an uninterested look, leaving the older woman to pout mournfully. A few minutes later, a knock on the door of Nizu's office alerted him of his visitor he had been monitoring on the school cameras. Just by observing him, he could see the boy was fairly different compared to the typical high school student. Seeing Midnight and Naruto Uzumaki come through the door, he plastered a welcoming smile. Hello, Naruto Uzumaki. Welcome to UA. The mouse greeted cheerfully. The 18-only hero sat him down in a chair next to himself. Thank you, he replied boringly with a dull, but slightly guarded voice. I'm glad you answered my call. It's great to have you. At the boy's nod and gaze shifting towards the woman next to him, Midnight continued for the principal. You're probably questioning why you've been summoned here today, yes? Naruto nodded. Eraserhead notified us of your existence, and your current circumstances. She smiled genuinely, which confused him a tad. The masked blonde's eye widened considerably before narrowing in suspicion. Is that so? He said evenly. Niza grinned. Of course, Aizawa seemed very fond of you, Mr. Uzumaki. I can't help but to want to share that sentiment. I don't understand. Namuri sat straighter in her chair. Aizawa has been trying to reach you for quite some time. He had a proposition for you, but you had left before he could offer anything, to be honest. We're quite surprised to have found you so easily. The blonde's eyebrows furrowed. Then why isn't Aizawa here to give this proposition? Suspicion leaked into the teenager's tone of voice. With the way his muscles tensed, Nizu and Midnight knew the boy was ready to act at even the slightest bit of harm. Well, Eraserhead is a teacher for the 1A course, and with the recent attacks on the USJ, he needs to dedicate all his time to his students. But he gave us permission to speak on his behalf. Nizu pointed out the window, where in a distance, a group of students seemed to be training individually. A man who remotely resembled Aizawa stood off to the side, a yellow object tucked under his arm. Naruto stayed silent as he stared at the two adults. Nizu only smiled in response, whereas Kiyama felt a little stricken by the boy's hardened gaze. I see. He glanced outwards at the supposed figure of Aizawa once more. The small principal pulled out a manila folder. On the label of the envelope was his name and his middle school ID picture. 3 similar papers were pulled from the folder, one each holding a red UA stamp on the top right corner. Take a look at this and tell me what you think, Niza suggested. The dog Bear Mouse slid the paper across the dark oak desk, where the blonde gingerly swept them up into his hand. The top of the first page read, UA Admission Profile. His eyebrow curled in confusion as he peered at the two heroes from his peripherals. The paper had all the general knowledge of his person, including his height, weight, quirk, background, and previous accolades in schooling. Swiping the first underneath the pile, the next one read, Hero Recommendation, where Shoyuta Aizawa Eraserhead was written neatly beneath, under Hero Comments. It said, Potential is outstanding, a good kid with a strong disposition, and beyond prepared for practical adaptability. Finally, the last paper was a UA invitation notice. The same one's qualifying students would be sent in the mail. A grinning All Might, dramatically posing, was centered in the middle with the words, You are accepted, emboldened. I don't understand, is this what I'm here for? Naruto gently handed the papers back, never once raising his voice or betraying his stoic facade. Midnight smiled at the teenager. Yes, Shoyuta went through the trouble of applying for you, hoping that he'd be able to find you when the time came for the UA admission test, and as you can see, you've been accepted on recommendation. Congratulations, Naruto. The scantily dressed woman bounced in her seat. If you choose to attend, you will place in Midnight's general education course, but with the UA Sports Festival coming up, you'd have a chance to be put into one of the hero courses. So, what do you say? Nizu grinned happily at the blonde. Naruto frowned. This all seems a little too good to be true. Since you seem to know me, you obviously know the circumstances behind mine and Aizawa's meeting. For all I know, there could be the police waiting for me once I step outside of this building. Why would you create such an elaborate lie? What are you planning? The teleportation quirk user stood from his seat, backing deliberately towards the door. What? No, please don't misunderstand. Namuri rose from her seat elegantly. We wouldn't do something so cruel. If we wanted you to be arrested, there's no way we would have let you step foot in UA, the woman assured. Niza leapt from his booster chair, snaking his hands behind his back. Kiyama stepped sideways, allowing the short principal to walk around his desk so that he could stand in front of the boy. The blonde stood unflinchingly, tracing the high-spec quirk user all the way. I admire your skepticism. The animal sighed. It's a certainly good trait to have. However, what Midnight says is true. That being said, I would be lying if I said I wasn't planning anything. Naruto looked to interrupt, but Niza shook his head reassuringly. It's truly a win-win situation, that's if you'd be willing to hear me out. The blue-eyed Uzumaki stared at the UA principal, and then glanced at the 18 hero. If it's possible, I would like to talk with Aizawa. I'm not sure I can trust what you say, the teenager confessed. Niza laughed good-heartedly. That's fine, I expected you to say so, Midnight Sensei? Kiyama perked up. Could you escort Mr. Uzumaki to 1A's training grounds? Be sure to thank Aizawa, he did tell us not to interrupt today. Even so, I can't say he'll be disappointed with the unexpected visitor. The woman looked the teenager up and down, licking her lips in sultry manner. It'd be my pleasure, come along Naruto. Namuri walked past the boy, motioning him to follow her. Outside, the masked blonde walked in stride with the slightly shorter woman. With the hallways empty, the echo of their footsteps clamored hypnotically. So Naruto-kun, where did you go to middle school? She asked seductively, drawing closer to him. The blonde looked at her funnily, as if asking, what's your problem? Naruto answered simply, Taiko. Namuri smiled, oh, so right here in Mustafu? Taiko is a decent school. How was your time there? She tilted her head in a curious manner. The masked boy kept his head forward. It was normal, he said stoically. You're such a chatterbox. The 18 hero laughed heartily. Naruto ignored the joust, choosing to only scoff at the woman, muttering what sounded like, what a drag, under his voice. What was that, mister? For the first time, the blonde turned his head to look at her in the eyes. To her delight, they were an icy blue much like her own dash. If only she could see the handsome face that was surely under that mask. You're an annoying woman, he said blandly, not even waiting for her reaction as he turned forward. Who I like when they play hard to get. Instead of being offended, she bit her finger, eyeing him with an aroused ogle. Training ground, 1A. Shuuta Aizawa looked down appraisingly at his students. They truly were a crop above the rest, and he believed they knew it as well. Some still needed attitude adjustments. Like his certain raging blonde exploding boy, they were all excellent users of their respective quirks, and their limits kept increasing as they trained further. The USJ incident really showed the students how unprepared they still were for the real world. They could have easily lost their lives, as well as him. Fortunately, they came out clean after All Might swept the rest of the League of Villains. Such cliché bullshit. It showed them what they needed to work on to improve and how to handle a situation like that better. It was sort of a blessing in disguise. He could do without the absolute beating he received from the giant beast, or Nomu though. He would probably indulge in even more training after being shown how helpless he was fighting the Nomu. He knew he wasn't a match for All Might, but still, he might have become complacent in his abilities over time, and that wasn't acceptable for him. It was truly pathetic, having to admit to his fellow heroes how a 15-year-old boy matched him in combat while also being cannon fodder against a biological created weapon. Speaking of the boy, he was expecting him sometime at school. Hopefully he accepted UA's invitation. The hero community did not have many underground heroes such as himself. Aizawa-san, hello, the voice said, rid of emotion. The long black-haired hero's eyes widened slightly under his bandaged face. He truly was not expecting this. He turned back around to his students as Naruto stood next to him doing the same. He peered over his bandages at the boy who now stood the same height as him. It's you. Aizawa matched the energy. Naruto nodded slowly. Yes, judging from your reaction, you might have been expecting me, he said stoically. I suppose I was. I knew an invitation from you would make any normal teenager jump at the opportunity. Wasn't sure it'd work on you, yet here you are, Aizawa said without facing him. The blonde sighed heavily. What do you want from me, Aizawa? Shuuta faced the blonde, looking slightly comical in his mummified form. I don't want anything from you. It's more like, what do you want for yourself? Naruto raised an eyebrow in confusion. When I first saw you, I thought to myself, isn't it my job to protect kids like this? It was as if I had failed at being a hero, as an underground hero. It's my job to stop crime. But what about stopping crime before it could happen? Seeing a kid in a place like that, left with no other choices, it felt like I had just woken up, my vision suddenly clearer. The masked teenager's eyes widened a bit. Aizawa turned to face his students once again. Eraserhead sighed. The potential I saw in you, I couldn't describe it, still can't. I get that you're skeptical. Trust me, I'd feel the same in your position. However, the potential I believe I saw was that of another perspective from what we have here at UA. I love my students, but damn it, none of them have seen what it's really like outside the parameters of the media. You were there, you nearly became a villain, and you've been in the ventures of desperation. None of these kids have seen the things you've seen, and that makes you more prepared than them for when the time comes for one to become a pro hero. Although, if I really had to answer, what do you want from me? Become a UA student, prove that you can be a pillar that supports the top heroes from the shadows. Destroy all the students at the sports festival with the power I know you are capable of. Even if some of them are my students, they don't have much to lose. But you, Naruto Uzumaki, have everything to lose, because you have nothing. You think you are the only one out there in the orphan system, or living on the streets with quirks but unable to prove themselves? Think Naruto, All Might may try for successors for the symbol of peace, but you could be something different for the sores that society has overlooked. Naruto stared wide-eyed at Aizawa. Naruto recollected himself and looked away from the hero. However, Aizawa could easily pick out the contemplation in his body language. Now you understand. I trust in your judgment to make the right choice. I did all that I did, because I believe in you. The man gripped his shoulder tightly and started to walk towards his group of students now waiting for him. Thank you, Aizawa. I think I've made my choice. The masked blonde marched away from the mummified man, a refreshed determination that had been absent, returning in full form. Naruto Uzumaki would be attending UA, Aizawa with class. As the underground hero approached his class, they all were whispering and pointing in the direction of Naruto retreating. Some were pale in the face. Others had their eyes and mouth wide as if they had been told the most unbelievable thing. Sometimes he forgot how easily swayed kids could be. Mina Ashido, the acid quirk user, shouted at him when he got close enough, Aizawa-sensei. Is it true that that blonde guy is your son? What? Aizawa thought annoyingly. His silence was taken the wrong way. I didn't know you had a son, sensei. Why didn't you tell us? Denki Kaminari, the electrification quirk user, said in exasperation, showing straight disbelief. Why he was cut off again by Sato, the sugar rush quirk user. Is he a third year or something? No, he is. Aizawa was getting fed up with being ignored, still being rushed with questions. Aizawa-sensei, what's his name? Why is he blonde? Is he wearing a mask to make his father feel better, Karo? I wonder if Aizawa-sensei has a daughter? Does he have daddy problems? Enough! He grumbled in a low and melodic voice, his eyes now glued upon their persons. Listen, he's not my son. Everyone turned to Ida, who looked away ashamed, before turning around and bowing at the waist in front of the homeroom teacher. I apologize, Aizawa-sensei. It is unbecoming of a student to assume something without evidence. I am ashamed to my classmates and upperclassmen. I will receive my punishment with honor. The turbo engine user yelled proudly towards the ground. Get up, you'll probably be seeing more of him. But no, he is not my son. Keep striving to improve. The sports festival is next week. Come prepared and determined. The entirety of Japan has their eyes on Class 1A. Dismissed. Everyone shuffled off embarrassingly, besides a few who didn't care much. Ida-san, you said he had the same bored look on his face as Aizawa-sensei. Where the hell does that say he's his son? Aizawa heard someone yell at the class representative as they left for the day. He was pretty hot though. Did you see that ass? Principal Nizu's office. I accept, Principal Nizu. The genius animal smiled and laughed happily for the boy. I see Aizawa has a lot of influence in your decision, the mouse said cheerfully with his fingers interlaced. Somewhat, the masked blonde said stoically. The white mouse smiled slyly in a way that confused the teenager. Now how about we have that talk about what I plan to do with you? Naruto leaned in unconsciously. A day later, for some reason, Kayama-sensei wanted to make a dramatic entrance for him on his first day. People around the school were already puzzled to see a new student a month after the exams. All the eyes were quizzically on him, and abruptly, like the previous day, Midnight came to the rescue. She told him on the way to class that there was a rumor he was Aizawa's son. She got a hearty chuckle out of that. Supposedly the engine-leg boy he met the day before had started it accidentally, and it further snowballed from there. Him an orphan, having parents? That was a laughable joke that died a long, long time ago. You ready, Naruto-kun? Count to 30 and then come in. We will have a necessary introduction, Namiri said confidently, cracking her whip in her right hand. Naruto sighed slowly. That's not necessary, Kayama-sensei. I can Jew. He was silenced by her finger directly pointed a little too close to his face. Nonsense. My students must fulfill their roles or be punished. She slapped the whip into her opposite hand suggestively. The R-rated hero watched as he gave the same unperturbed look as the first time they met. The hardest ones to fluster are always my favorite. She bit her bottom lip. Oh, you naughty boy, I'll get you eventually. She entered the room slowly and gently shut the door behind her. Hello, class. Today we have a new student. He was recently brought in to fill our empty spot. You might have already seen him around school, but I'll allow him to introduce himself to you all. Remember not to speak, or get the whip. After 30 seconds, the door creaked open, revealing a lightly tanned blonde with a mask covering the bottom half of his face. Many people in the class instantly recognized him as the supposed Class 1A sensei's son through rumors, while others couldn't care less or had no idea of him at all. Some girls became flustered at his appearance. He was really mysterious and quite the looker even with the mask. His blonde hair was unruly and covered his forehead with a bright messy blonde, while half-lidded blue eyes looked lazily upon the group of teenagers. His face had no blemishes or damaged skin, and he seemed to be pretty athletically built based on how his uniform stretched in certain areas of his body. He held his bag at his side, while his right hand found its way into his pocket. What a steal! Some of the girls thought excitedly. Midnight motioned for him to speak. Hello, my name is Naruto Uzumaki. I hope we can get along. He kept his hands in pockets, waiting for someone to ask a question. None came. Everyone looked at him and then went back to their teacher. Was he supposed to say anything else? Naruto-kun, when introducing yourself you say your likes, dislikes, and hobbies, you know that sort of stuff, so, Kayama wafted her hand in a circular motion, getting him to continue. My likes? I have some dislikes? I have some of those as well. Hobbies? Maybe. He passively looked towards Namuri, whose eye was twitching. She shuffled him off to a seat in the back. Oh well, thank you Naruto-kun. Just take out your review guides. We have material to cover. Remember to get ready for the sports festival. This is your chance to prove yourself to the heroes and their agencies. Do not disregard other routes as well. They do offer big bucks for inventive and business personalities. Keep an open mind. Naruto sat next to a purple-haired boy with long spiked-out hair with deep bags under his eyes. He looked on boringly with his hand in his palm, tuning out the lecture. He turned slightly to the side to face the masked blonde. Recommendation? Naruto's emotionless face turned towards the boy who actually looked like Aizawa's illegitimate child. Yes, he said shortly. The bored boy returned his gaze forwardly. That's nice. My name's Hitoshi Shinso. He didn't offer his hand or even seem mildly interested. Nice to meet you, Naruto said lazily. Shinso turned a speculative eye towards him. I think we'll get along well, he said evenly without any emotion. Maybe your quirk is very interesting. For the first time since he sat down, Hitoshi's eyes widened. Shinso collected himself once more after staring at the new kid for a few seconds. How do you know about my quirk? I know everyone's quirk, strengths, weaknesses, etc., the UA Gen Ed said lamely. Shinso's face vaulted upwards once more. Is that a part of your quirk? No. A ruler flew past the blonde's head, impaling the stone wall behind him. Shinso fell backwards into his seat, remembering the sadistic tendencies of his homeroom teacher. Hey Naruto-kun, it's your first day. Pay attention. If you don't, you'll have to be punished. Naruto's face paled for a partial second. Troublesome woman, Naruto thought. Later, location Class 1A hallway. The purple-haired boy had asked Naruto to follow him after class. The blonde wasn't quite sure what they were doing, but he had a remote idea considering that half of the school had been walking with them for a few minutes. This crowd led them to a large door, labeled 1A on it, where a bunch of students were gathering for some reason. That was until an ashy blonde came raging out into the hallway. Get the fuck out of here! Shinso pushed his way to the front. Naruto followed along, just slightly beyond the shorter teenager. Canon Shinso intro and declaration of war. Hitoshi turned to leave when someone grabbed Naruto by the shoulder. I'm Tenya Ida from Class 1A. I apologize for starting a rumor about my fellow student. It is against my ideals. So I humbly apologize, he said to the blonde who looked back lazily. Tenya seemed to notice his uniform and confusedly looked him up and down. Wait. Since when did you go here? I was to replace a seat in the general education course, that's all, the Uzumaki said stoically, leaving the turbo quirk user uncomfortable with his dead eyes. Shinso and Naruto left without another word. Students parted like the Red Sea. Even if they were Gen Ed students, they were intimidating to even the other hero students. That was quite the show, Shinso, the masked blonde rumbled under his mask, keeping his hands in his pockets. The purple-haired teenager looked over for a second at his classmate. I can't stand people like that, he stated with disgust. Katsuki Bakugo can back up his arrogance, just like a select few in 1A. Shinso raised an eyebrow at that comment. Naruto began to walk away. We'll see. They walked in comfortable silence, lost in their own thoughts. Principal meeting with teachers. What? You can't be serious, Principal Nizu. Vlad King or Kansekijiro exclaimed, completely lost at the logic. Other teachers voiced their concerns, all over the same thing, Naruto Uzumaki. He matched Aizawa in combat without his quirk and was working in a villainous ring? How was such a person admitted to this institution? Another added. Nisa laughed heartily. Let's settle down now. He deserves a chance to compete for a certain reason you do not know of. I gave him a mission as a result of his acceptance. All Might voiced his doubt in his skeleton form. Mission? Yes, to win the sports festival, under the guise of a hero student turned from the path of villainy. He chuckled with Midnight, as all others began to yell their disagreements once again. All Might discreetly left to notify his student. He was worried about young Midoriya. But he knew Nisa always had a good reason for the choices he made. That didn't mean he couldn't warn his student about a certain blonde Uzumaki, with Deka. Oh, I'm so pumped, Deka-kun. The festival is in 3 days. We've all been training so hard. Ochako exclaimed as she walked with her black and green-haired classmate. Deka smiled brightly at her. Right. Let's do our best. Psst. Young Midoriya. Over here. The one-for-all successor turned to his master, the number one hero, All Might. Oh, All Might, what's going on? Izuku asked innocently, with Ochako standing next to him. All Might motioned for him to come around the corner. He looked like he was in a panic, so thinking it was important he followed quickly behind the very large man. All Might, what's wrong? The boy asked worryingly. The blonde-haired hero sighed loudly. All I can say is stay away from Naruto Uzumaki during the sports festival. I can't say anything else. Oh yeah, and good luck and don't forget to clench your cheeks. Then the large man brought his never-dying grin back on and sprinted away with blood pooling around the corners of his lips. Wait. I don't even know who that is, Deku tried to call after him, but to no prevail. Walking back around the corner to an awaiting Ochako, shuffling her feet around, she turned her head and visibly brightened at his reappearance. What happened? What did All Might say? Stay away from Naruto Uzumaki during the sports festival. But he didn't even give me anything else to go on. What does that even mean? He tried to come up with an answer, but was left with more questions than answers. If this person was putting All Might on edge for his safety, then he would abide by his words for sure. Oh, okay, then we will, right? It's probably like some agency person or something, she said, trying to cheer him up. He smiled at her. You're probably right, thanks Ochako-san. The sports festival was almost here. He shouldn't be getting nervous, especially since he had to prove himself worthy to All Might and the world. That should be the only thing on his mind. Yeah, probably some manipulative businessman. The sports festival was one of the biggest showings all year for the country of Japan. With the decline of the Olympics over the years, UA began to fill the void left vacant by the once groundbreaking event. In the festival, thousands upon thousands of fans, heroes, and sidekicks come to scout the up-and-coming talent nearing the hero world. Usually, the eyes were on the third years, but for the first time since the competition began, the first-year tournament held record-breaking attendance. News stations from across the country filed in to get a glimpse at Class 1A, who had recently been attacked by villains, according to local newscasters in Mustafu. The first years were some of the most promising prospects for the future top 10 heroes since All Might's golden era. Though Mirio Togata the Permeation Quirk third year currently bear the title for most likely to become the number one hero. These new UA students were regarded as some of the strongest candidates in the last decade, even with many of the top heroes' attention on students from 1A. Class 1B was just as talented. Nito Monoma, Itsuka Kendo and Tetsu were among the top prospects from the secondary hero course. In the sport festival, the lower classes, Gen Ed, Support, and the business course, were looked down upon as cannon fodder, sadly. Only a few in the many years of the event had ever made the finals from the lower stage classes. There were a few rumors of 2 students from the 1C Gen Ed who could stand on equal ground with the best students in the hero courses, but in the end, those rumors were lost in the hype. Locker room, 1A. Shoyuta Aizawa or Eraserhead notified his students to meet with him briefly before their entrance ceremony. Naruto Uzumaki was putting the other teachers on edge, and they were right in their judgment. Treading lightly around the recently placed Gen Ed boy would result in failure from even the best of heroes. The blonde had experience, skill, and a resurgence of fierce determination. Uzumaki was cold-blooded and a signified taskmaster. Failure wasn't an option for him. knowing how he didn't have the luxury of second chance. He would be a dangerous adversary for all competing. The question was, when would they realize that? Midoriya, I don't know why All Might has his sights set on you, but I will beat you, Shoto Todoroki, the half-hot, half-cold quirk user says emotionlessly. His declaration brought upon the entire room's attention. Izuki smiled nervously and bit back the anxiety he felt. I'll do my best. The young one for all user was stopped by a hand on his shoulder. Enough with the useless banter. The black-haired hero turned around so that the entire class could hear him. Everyone has their eyes on you today. These petty rivalries will not get you an internship at a top agency. It isn't about who beats who. It's about who shows the most promise to become a great pro hero. Plus, now that the lower classes are in an equal setting, don't be surprised when they start headhunting for your position. Do your best. I know you are all capable of doing so. Now get ready. You'll be announced soon. Aizawa gave a short speech. He was proud to see that his students listened closely. Even Bakugo allowed himself to take the simple advice, which was surprising considering he was ignored in the Midoriya Todoroki rivalry banter. The slim man let his eyes wander the room once more as back towards the locker room door. Today would be a great challenge for them, and he was excited to see who would show the conviction to rise above the adversity. Locker room, Class 1B. Vlad King had been trying to conjure up a speech to say, but he couldn't come up with the right words. He couldn't say he was really behind having an ex-villain competing because of Nisa's supposed publicity stunt. There was nothing keeping him from warning his kids about it though. The students were strategizing about how they were going to mastermind the first two events. Well, Monoma more than anyone, they all knew 1A was strong, not that they would admit that to each other. It just happened that 1A was in the right place at the right time, which was the only reason for their recent fame. Seriously, they were scheduled to be at USJ the very next day. Couldn't the villains have attacked then? The door to the 1B locker room swung open. The wide-set, muscular blood hero, Vlad King, marched in, folding his arms across his chest with an accompanying frown. Gather around everyone, the voice bellowed over the clashing of lockers and benches. Listen up. I'm only going to say this once. 1A is a very well-led class, their teacher is a very good hero, so it's no surprise that his class is strong. But, if you only look up, then you are destined to have the rug pulled out from underneath you. The students of 1B looked at each other quizzingly. Sekijiro-sensei had never scolded them for their dislike of 1A before, so why now? There are others below you as well, they too want a shot at the top. You aren't the only ones. Midnight's Gen Ed course in particular is very solid this year. Ken turned away to leave the room. It was better if they didn't question his reason for being there. Be prepared for anything. That's what makes a great hero. Star chasing is the way of celebrities. You are not celebrities, you are heroes. Good luck. 1B began to look at each other oddly. For their usual extremely biased teacher to compliment another class, it was almost unheard of. The previous confidence was reaching a new low as their burly teacher strode out of the room emotionlessly. Itsuka Kendo watched as most of her classmates squirmed nervously. Of anything, shouldn't everyone be even more focused in? Ken-sensei had definitely been warning them about something, but everyone seemed to be too caught up in Vlad King being disappointed in their behavior. Monoma was standing near the locker room entrance with his arms crossed over his chest, a provoking glance directed at her. Monoma was probably going to go off on another one of his tangents. Hey! The blonde copy user yelled as he pushed himself off the wall. Stop being so melodramatic. Sekijiro-sensei just didn't want us to get a big head before the festival. Our plans are still the same as before. We embarrass 1A while also making sure that we aren't taken by surprise. It's simple shit. Get yourselves together, you pansies, Nito scoffed, slapping his friend Senkaibara in head. A couple of the guys snickered at the interaction, alleviating some of the tension in the room. The big fist quirk user sent the light blonde a grateful smile at bringing everyone back into reality. Monoma really had his streaks. With his charismatic streak seen now, only happening every so often, Kendo had to thank the ones above for that charisma coming back at a much-needed time. 1A is for sure quaking in their shoes at our might. I can feel it in my loins. And it was gone. Introduction ceremony. Hello and welcome to the UA Sports Festival. Yeah! Hero, Present Mike yelled over the stadium's loudspeakers, getting a thunderous applause. The year's first-year sports festival is the largest in the history of UA. Show the students your enthusiasm. The cheers shook the tunnels the students stood under. The butterflies in the students' stomachs fluttered in response. barely contained excitement riddled the air as the UA kids soaked in the attention. Now without further ado let's introduce the classes. The Mohawk hero yelled. Aizawa sat uncaring, being used to the deafening volumes of his friend's voice. Todoroki, Bakugo, and Midoriya walked in front of Class 1A holding their heads high. Pure looks of determination and surprising stoicism from Bakugo shone clearly. Some of their classmates behind them waved at the crowd and chanted along with them. Here's the fan favorites, Class 1A, being led by number 1 student, Katsuki Bakugo, and number 2 and 3 students, Shoto Todoroki and Momo Yayorozu. All camera crewmen pointed their cameras at the incoming hero students, flashing and recording as the deafening atmosphere skyrocketed. Oh, and here's Class 1B. The second hero course has some serious talent just like their 1A counterparts. They are being led by the top student Nito Minoma, and the 2 runner-ups, Juzo Hananuki and Setsuna Tokage. Yeah! The boisterous applause continued without pause. 1B held an air of confidence as they walked almost unitedly down their respective tunnel. Class 1C stood shaking in their boots, seeing the hero course students. Most knew they were only there for the others' entertainment, and they couldn't help but be afraid of the sum of the strongest hero prospects in the country. Naruto stood silently in the back with his hands in his pockets. 1A and 1B seemed way more than serious than he would have expected. Now introducing 18 Hero Midnight's Class 1C underdogs. These hounds are griping at a chance for the top, led by top student Hitoshi Shinso and runner-ups, Satsutaka Agamotto and Chikuchi Togaike. Some of the crowd began to bark like dogs, much to the embarrassment of the students. The other classes filled the stadium up soon after with applause, but not as much as the first 3 classes. They were all led to the middle of the stadium where one UA student would give the introductory speech, which more than likely would be someone from the top 3 in 1A or 1B. Midnight was positioned on stage near the mic, cracking around her whip as she did so. Many of the male student body unused to the women's provocative image nearly bled from the nose while covering their lower parts. And here's the first proctor, Midnight. Take him away! President Mike yelled in excitement, drawing the attention to the voluptuous woman. All right, kiddos, Katsuki Bakugo was chosen for the introduction speech. Come on up, young man. The declaration drew murmurs from inside the student crowd. The ashy blonde pushed his way to the front, roughly shouldering into those even remotely in his path. Really? Him? He doesn't represent us, much less a hero. He called me Shrimp Dick. Well, he did get number 1 in the exam. He called me a useless background character. Mr. Hothead is supposed to inspire us. How low can we get? No way. That guy was in my exam. He's psychotic. Bakugo made the students go silent as he grabbed the mic. I pledged to be number 1. The stadium went dead quiet. However, the silence was short-lived as numerous shouts of outrage and boos littered the students and crowd. Kaken really isn't a motivational speaker. The one for all users sighed in his head. Katsuki completely ignored the chaos as he strode back in the 1A section. If the other classes didn't hate us before, they sure do now, the green-haired boy chuckled humorlessly. Hitoshi looked over at the person next to him who had been quiet from the start. Such arrogance. I expected nothing less, the brainwashing quirk user said lowly in a gravely monotone. All the commotion was giving him a headache. This whole entrance charade was a little too dramatic for his tastes. This is a drag, the masked blonde said expressionlessly. Hitoshi, said the taller teenager, what's your plan? The lightly tanned Gen Ed student stared at Katsuki Bakugo, the sneer still present on his face. I won't have to plan anything, didn't you see? I think Katsuki Bakugo did us a favor by taking all the attention upon himself. The blonde nodded at the logic. It was true. Everyone would be gunning for the number 1 student because of the shots he's been taking at the other classes all year. Shinso glanced to the taller boy. How about you? We'll see. All right. Now it's time for the selection spin. Namuri announced as a screen displayed behind her. There were at least a dozen categories, all which were unreadable due to the speed of the spin. The students waited anxiously for the spinner to stop, and after a few seconds it did. Obstacle course. Naruto blinked. A race with a quirk like his? How convenient. A couple minutes later, all of the students crowded around the starting post, where 3 bulbs lit red hung overhead. The start of the course would lead them outside of the stadium where they'd be monitored by the numerous cameras riddled throughout the different obstacles. This meant that roughly 150 students were crowded around the narrow starting line, Heavy breathing and light whispers were the only sounds made. Ready? Go! President Mike blurted out through his mic as the students started out the tunnel, with Todoroki freezing most of the group off the start. Bastard! I'll kill you! Katsuki yelled, bursting the ice. His explosions carried him in flight as he propelled angrily after him. The rest were left to glide uneasily against the slick ice path Shoto created. Most of 1A already found ways to counter. Knowing Todoroki's quirk best, 1B was sticking together, using their quirks in smaller quantities. Naruto saw Hitoshi brainwash some support course kids, making them carry him on their shoulders. For the masked blonde, the towering robots weren't much of a problem, so he steered clear and arranged himself in the middle of the pack. Although he knew of every notable quirk, he wanted to witness the hero students in action. He wanted to discover their limits. It seemed some of 1B had the same idea. To his left, a group of 1B guys studied the last half of 1A's students escaping the giant bots before following along. Cannon race, Todoroki and Bakugo are battling to keep up with Midoriya. It's coming down to the wire, let them hear you folks. The crowd boomed in unison, encouraging students to give their all in the final push. Cameras from all angles pointed towards the dark tunnel, waiting in thick silence for the first of the pack to finish. And the winner of the obstacle course, Izuku Midoriya from Class 1A, the one for all user, teared up as people chanted his name. It truly was one of the best feelings in the world, and this was the first time he ever got to experience such praise. On top of that, he could see All Might giving him a thumbs up. Todoroki and Bakugo followed behind in second and third, leaving both disappointed in losing to the smaller teenager, though the latter raged more violently. Cannon order a finish. Aoi! My tummy! I can make it! Aoyama, the naval laser quirk user, gripped his stomach but continued to jog along, following closely behind the others. As he got into the darkness of the tunnel and viewed the finish line, a sense of glee came over him. He persevered, albeit barely, but persevered nonetheless. Suddenly that heavenly sense grew dangerous and foreboding. Naruto flashed behind the sparkling boy, delivering a chop to the neck. Yuga struggled for a brief second before his body went completely limp. The masked blonde laid the boy down on the ground with a careful thud. Sorry, Aoyama. The former villain scooped up some of the loose rubble that the previous competitors created. Naruto jogged down the tunnel, patting himself with dirt, while cutting small slits into his uniform. He could hear the other students behind him bellow in effort to catch up, but as calculated, Naruto was too close to the finish line. And the final contestant, Naruto Uzumaki. Get a good look, everyone. These are your contenders for the next round. The hollering began again, but for some seeing that name made them pale. Izuku was baking in the glory of the public eye, lost in his own world. He was honestly tuning out President Mike in order to strategize for the next round, but he heard that name All Might had warned him about, and the guy looked pretty beat up. Maybe his quirk was better for other things. Perhaps All Might got the name wrong? Of anything, the Shinso Hitoshi guy gave him more anxiety. He didn't even see the purple-haired guy's quirk. He peered over at Ochako, who had placed 15th, and it seemed she shared the same mentality as him. At least he wasn't alone in that line of thinking. Naruto Uzumaki didn't seem like much of a threat. Shinso saw the disregarding looks of the other students. Fools, he sent Naruto a knowing smirk and a small nod, which he received back. I was almost disappointed that he wouldn't make this round. Looks like that was a part of his plan. Pro Hero Lounge. Power Loader watched, shaking his head lightly. The other students had no clue who that boy was, and he was just toying with them. They're walking right into his hand. It's graciously cunning. The large tech hero grumbled appraisingly. The hell are you talking about? Gigantification quirk user, MT, lady, questioned while wrapping her hair around her finger. The tech hero sighed audibly, drawing more attention from the room after his comment. Naruto Uzumaki, the kid who came in last, is a very dangerous kid, the large man said with his arms crossed, not noticing the looks of disbelief others were sending his way. This time Kamui Wood spoke before you. Power Loader, do not see the boy. Looks like he got hit by every landmine on the course. His comment got laughs out of most people in the room. His quirk wouldn't allow that. The obstacle course should be child's play for him. Now the entire room drew their attention to the support course teacher. The blonde woman scoffed sarcastically. Shouldn't he be in the hero course then? Well, I suppose no one in this room knows. Maijima sighed. Until last week, he wasn't even a student at UA. Kamui Woods visibly perked up at that. It was extremely rare for a student to join a hero school during the semester. However, there left a couple possibilities to how this was acceptable. Was he a transferee from Shiketsu or Ketsubutsu? The Arbor Quirk user asked curiously. The orange-haired man laughed. Yu and Shinji glanced at each other. No, he was in fact recommended to UA by one of the UA teachers, the man said, getting an impressed look from some of the heroes around them. Kamui was still skeptical. Then why wasn't he admitted at the start of the semester? Why wait this long to induct him? The up-and-rising hero pushed further. Power Loader started to sweat nervously. Well, there is a particular reason, he admitted with a dry chuckle. And? MT, Lady wafted her hand. The UA support course teacher looked over his shoulder, trying to make sure too many people were listening. He didn't know if he was supposed to say anything about Uzumaki's situation, but he mistakenly figured Kamui already knew about the boy given that he was recently assigned to the Mustafa area. The tech hero leaned in towards the two new heroes. Naruto Uzumaki used to be a villain, he stated simply. Both heroes' eyes widened, Takayama more exaggeratingly so. You're kidding, right? Why the hell is an ex-villain in a hero academy? Heated questions from the horned woman sounded throughout the room. The heroes surrounding them flinched at the question, all quickly abandoning any conversations to stare at their table. Power Loader began to sweat even more. Look, he seems to be a decent kid. Eraserhead found him a few months ago, but it wasn't until recently that UA extended the invitation to him. Niza has everything under control, I think, the tech hero said, drawing many to look appalled at the news of Naruto Uzumaki's entrance into the school. Shouldn't he be in juvie instead of UA? Last time I checked, criminals weren't allowed into hero schools. MT, Lady grit at the man, angry at UA's decision. How should I say this? Naruto is a special case? Maijima lamely said. At Taiko Junior High, he was said to be a once-in-generation student. He was even compared to the genius of Hawks and the potential of Mirko. But a couple years ago, he was dropped from government's plan for orphans after finding a family to adopt him. However, due to some tragic circumstances, Naruto lost it all and had no way of being reinstated into the program due to his age. He had no living relatives in Japan or anywhere for that matter. This led to him being homeless for a while, which got him caught up in some shady villainous rings because of his financial problems. His affiliations were unknown at the time, but in school, his demeanor and work ethic declined rapidly, along with his attendance. It continued like this until one day he went completely AWOL. Naruto dropped off the grid and was reported missing for months at a time. That was when Eraserhead discovered his existence, in which the boy evaded Aizawa for months after. It wasn't until recently that we even knew of him, where at that point, he couldn't be ignored anymore after saving a little girl with a quirk activation gone haywire. And now we're here. The man summarized the best he could. There was still plenty of gaps in that story, gaps that occurred over long stretches of time. The heroes seemed to calm slightly at the reason for Naruto's entrance, if only for the moment. Even without all the excessive details, it was easy to understand that a story of tragedy followed the UA student. MT. Lady felt heartbroken after hearing the brief rundown of his acceptance into UA. Assuming a child was scum because of a label such as villain made her disgusted with her previous statements. He must be a very interesting child, Kamui concluded. I suppose with accepting the invitation, it wouldn't be wrong to assume he has strong motives and ideals as a hero in training? On the screen in front of them, Naruto Uzumaki was displayed in his beat-up uniform. I'm not sure yet, I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. Power Loader smiled shortly. Anybody who went out of their way to rescue others was already a hero to him. Kamui Woods took a sip of water under his mask. I see, yet, what does this have to do with his subpar performance from the first round? The woodcork user asked as he was somewhat intrigued with such a person. When I said Naruto was dangerous, I meant it. Eraserhead was the one that found him. But I didn't say he caught him. He fought Eraserhead to a standstill, maybe more in Uzumaki's favor. Without even using his quirk, Nishiya and Takayama's eyes widened. I was waiting to see when he popped up during the obstacle course, but he never did. That means he probably has something planned, because anyone who can actively fight Eraserhead would never look like that after something measly as a sports festival obstacle course. He paused to see the looks of astonishment and understanding. Uzumaki was seen conversing with the other boy from 1C on the TV. 1A and 1B went their respective ways as people congratulated each other on getting into the second round. By ignoring him as the lucky last spot, he has no one targeting him because he is seen as not strong enough. These students want competition and to prove themselves by beating the best. By Uzumaki solidifying himself as a non-threat, he takes the cameras off him and directs them on the top students, therefore giving him free rein to operate however he wants without revealing any of his skills. The others are underestimating him, and the boy is baiting them into a trap they set themselves. If I was a top hero, then he would be my first choice for an internship for that strategic output alone. The group looked at the masked blonde through the screen in a new light. Naruto Uzumaki even played them, pro-heroes, for fools, and they wouldn't have even noticed if it wasn't for their fellow hero. Sidekicks and heroes alike were beginning to call their superiors to warn them of this prospect. Someone like him was a diamond in the rough, truly and utterly fantastic potential, even if they had to keep an eye on him because of his shady past. Top 10 hero booth. Ha! Seriously, was that kid running through the minefield blindfolded? Bunny hero, Mirko, laughed, slapping her thighs, grinning like a loon. 5 of the top 10 heroes turned to her like she was truly ignorant. Ryuko Tatsuma, or Dragon Hero, Ryukyu, looked unimpressed at her. Such an excellent tactic and you don't see it. I suppose I can't blame you though. You aren't really known for your brains. The blonde-haired woman giggled at the furious look on Mirko's face. Ryukyu was ranked 9th in the hero ranking. What did you say? What tactic? He was playing hopscotch on the mines. The others laughed at her. It truly did look like that. Shield Hero, Crust, laughed and gripped her shoulder. It's okay to be slow on the upbringing, the 6th-ranked hero teased. As the bunny hero pouted in her own world, the 3rd-ranked hero, Hawks, texted his secretary, "Hey Ami, put Naruto Uzumaki down on my potentials for an internship." The winged hero grinned seeing the lazy look on the boy's face as they began to explain what the second round would entail. It was like he found a long-lost brother. No way he'd pass up that chance. "Sir? Are you sure?" His secretary responded confusingly. "Yeah, I'm sure you'll see why soon." He put his phone back into his pocket and kicked up his legs on the seat in front of him. "Let's see what you have in store." Naruto Uzumaki, Best Genist, the 4th-ranked hero, did the same as Hawks. Intelligent heroes in training drew his attention clearly. All Might gripped his seat in frustration. He warned young Midoriya. He out of all people should know not to underestimate someone. He could see the same look on his successor's face as the rest of them. Pure denial of Uzumaki's ability. Young Uzumaki is an anomaly. I'm sure Endeavor has already staked his claim. As a teacher at UA, I already knew he was going to be a troublesome opponent for the others. Hopefully they will uncover his master plan soon. The large man states in his buff form, getting nods of agreement, and the same look of confusion on Mirko's face. With Aizawa, I've taught my students better than this. But I can't help but give credit where it's due. Well done, Naruto, he thought before getting slapped on his back. Don't sleep on the job, Eraserhead, they are starting to pick their teams. The Mohawk hero exclaimed to the annoyed underground hero. On the field, the second event ended up being a cavalry battle. Students were allowed 15 minutes to pick up to 3 other students as teammates. Each student was assigned a headband with the certain number of points they earned as a result of the obstacle course. This left Deku feeling outed, knowing he had a target plastered on his chest with the first-place position value of 10 million points. Students combined to complement each other's quirks, while others struggled to find teams. Going by yourself, Naruto? Shinso asked the masked blonde, knowing he could if he wanted. Naruto nodded. Yeah, seems no one wanted me on their team. You got a strategy in mind, Hitoshi? The taller teenager said quietly, making sure none heard him. Yeah, I guess not that I got to tell you though. Shinso smirked as he strolled away to find victims to be his teammates. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the brainwashing quirk user. He gave Shinso a chance to use his quirk on him, yet the boy didn't lunge at the chance. I mean, it wouldn't work on me, but I'd still feel the attempt, so why? The blonde shook his head. He could just ask his classmate later. As the teams were in their final stages of forming, it was clear which teams would be difficult to defeat and those that wouldn't. He could already hear the murmurs of strategy which more than often revolved around attacking Midoriya's team. It was evident that Midoriya would be the high-profile target, considering that having his headband was an automatic victory at the end of the time limit. He wanted to keep his quirk unknown to the others. They could display all the effort, and when the fatigue hit them or let their guard down, he'd swoop in for easy pickings. At the end of the 15 minutes, the teams were created and placed in position on the qualifying board. First, Team Midoriya Izuku, 10M, Ochako, 150, Tokoimi, 180, Hatsum, 10. Second, Team Tetsutetsu, 165, Hananuki, 190, Oase, 155, Shiozaki, 195. Third, Team Bakugo, 200, Kirishima, 170, Ashido, 120, Siro, 175. Fourth, Team Todoroki, 205, Ada, 185, Yaoyorozu, 130, Kaminari, 95. Fifth, Team Mineta, 125, Shoji, 145, Ajiri, 150. Sixth, Team Hagakure, 25, Jiro, 110, Sato, 140, Koda, 115. Seventh, Team Monoma, 35, Tsubaraba, 100, Kaibara, 105, Kurwaro, 65. Eighth, Team Shinso, 80, Shota, 50, Ojiro, 160. Ninth, Team Kendo, 75, Yanaga, 85, Tokage, 20, Komori, 45. 10th, Team Kodai, 60, Bondo, 90, Fukudashi, 15. 11th, Team Rin, 55, Shishida, 70. 12th, Team Tsunatori, 30, Kamakiri, 40. 13th, Team Uzumaki, 5. Talk about sad. Kid's gonna need a miracle. The crowd started conversing, seeing the boy isolated from his peers. All the teams lined up with their riders, ready to attack their strategically planned targets. President Mike came over the stadium-wide speakers. The cavalry battle of the second round begins in 3, 2, 1 GOO. Chaos erupted right off the bat, teams digging in and battling for supremacy. Though for one masked blonde, he merely disappeared in the chaos. He would be watching, waiting for his approach as he let the others do all the hard work. In the Pro Hero Lounge. What? Where did Uzumaki go? Why isn't he going for the other headbands? You look disappointed. Power Loader was hyping him up for nothing. Kamui Woods nodded at the Gen Ed student's supposed strategy. He's playing it smart, the headbands will come to him. The others wanted to muscle their way through, but he would do it with his brain. He didn't need first, and Naruto knew that, so he would probably take out the lower teams to continue staying off the radar. A simple, yet effective plan. So what's his quirk then? You speak as if it is very strong, Kamui Woods added his thoughts, seemingly speaking for those around him. Power Loader smirked slyly. Oh, it is, you just have to wait. Why spoil all the fun? The room stayed silent, all trying to decipher what quirk Uzumaki utilized. Invisibility? Ground merging? Shapeshifter? No one knew yet. Top 10 heroes. Magnificent, the Uzumaki boy has truly captured my attention. The hero's students have completely forgotten he's even in the competition. Although, I am impressed with Nito Monoma and his team. They are staying under the radar quite well. Best Genus praised, clearly impressed. Kigo or Hawks continued to stay silent. He's using his low point value to disappear into the crowd. Uzumaki knows that he won't be targeted because the effort to get 5 points wouldn't be worth it. The strategy is pretty simple, but it seems to be enough for these kids. For now, he would sit back and relax, letting it play out on its own, even though he would bet all his money on Uzumaki into the third round. What? You old croons, he's running away. That's not very hero-like to me. The bunny hero crossed her arms angrily. Ryukyu chuckled. If the boy is able to pull through into the third round, I'll be extending an invitation to my agency for the internships. Shit! There's a few decent prospects already, but I still want to see what this boy's going to do. Shield Hero, cursed squirming in his seat. All Might continued to watch his student. He knew Uzumaki would not go after young Midoriya. Such a thing was foolhardy considering Todoroki and Bakugo's teams were constantly interfering. Go my students. Haha. On the field. Cannon after 28:30. Team Bakugo gets their headband back from Team Monoma, putting them in second place. The screen shuffled the team names as the round continued and grew closer to a close. 1:30 remaining. President Mike said, silencing the crowd. Naruto looked down upon the lower teams with smaller numbered headbands. He was aiming for third or fourth place. There was no point to go any higher. He flashed 200 MNW, snagging 70 points from Team Tsunatori. The two Class 1B students stood unbelievingly at the headband disappearing from their rider's neck. What the shit? They were trying to stay with as many points as they could. Pony! What happened? Kamakiri yelled at the foreign girl. Oh, what team Sinatori lost their headband. Present Mike saw its vacancy, but not the perpetrator. What the hell was going on? It's him, no doubt about it. No one is even paying attention because they're too focused on Midoriya and Todoroki fighting. Aizawa's eyebrows raised crazily. In the short time frame, Naruto flashed to Team Rin. Having no knowledge of his intrusion, the headband slipped perfectly off Rin's forehead. With another flash, he planned his next move. Team Rin lost their headband? The crowd was going wild with the build-up, trying to figure out who was thieving headbands so quickly. RAH! Shishido roared in his beast form. His partner grew pale, seeing how their chances decreased once more. Hitoshi was the only really acknowledging Present Mike. Both of those teams just got their headbands back from Team Kendo and Team Monoma. He looked up to the scoreboard to see who got them, but nothing had changed. Nobody knew who had the points. Seeing Team Kodai taking a breather in the masked blonde's peripheral, he flashed 45 ME towards their position. It was easy pickings like before, all within 15 seconds, and he now had 4 headbands. Yui reached her hand up to touch the headband only to find it gone. The mute girl's eyes widened in panic, leaving her teammates to look up at her in horror. Wow! Team Kodai lost their headband too. Who's the headband bandit? Yay! The stadium exploded with thunderous excitement. Pro Hero Lounge. What the hell is going on? MT. Lady fell back in her seat, trying to follow something invisible to the naked eye. Power Loader had never seen the extent of his quirk before. It was amazing. Even knowing his quirk, it's still so impressive. The Uzumaki boy? Kamui asked, although he was sure of the answer. The large tech hero nodded and continued to stare at the screen as the crowd grew louder and louder with each second closing into the finale. Back in the arena, Naruto blurred off to the side. It seemed the element of surprise was no longer applicable. Hearing other teams drop like flies scared the others into defending themselves instead of attacking other squads. Even if they protected themselves, he would be gone before they could react. He only needed one last headband to push himself into the top 4. Team Monoma stood guarded. They had just lost another one of their headbands to that psychopath, Bakugo. One of the other higher teams was snatching headbands consecutively and fiercely. But no evidence of battle or confrontation. They couldn't afford to lose their original. Monoma would never say it, but someone here was powerful, and yet they didn't know who. What are we supposed to do? They're not even saying who has the headbands. Subiraba yelled. They still had a headband and enough to sneak into last place in the event. They all shared his mindset. They couldn't afford to lose. 5 seconds left. The silence was heavy on the field, everyone looking in all directions and using their senses to pick up approaching foes. Stay on guard, Monoma whispered, feeling the others nod underneath him. 4. Fans began to chant the countdown. 3. The teams were sweating heavily, throats and mouths dry. 2. A body shot past the light blonde's head. The headband labeled 305 slipped cleanly off the teenager's neck. 1. A minuscule amount of dust was kicked up, but there wasn't any time to react. Time's up. Let's see the finalists. Midnight hollered out to the teams. Present Mike took over for Namuri as the names and numbers came through. Team Todoroki, first place. Applause and praise rained down from the seats, showering the 4. The blonde copy quirk user looked down at his hands with no headband present in them. This is not possible. His eyes shook in terror. Team Bakugo, second place. The cheers continued, but Bakugo was less than pleased with finishing anything but first. Monoma, what's wrong? Shinkibara asked their team leader. But upon noticing the reason for his frightened look, his own stature froze. Team Shinso, third place. Midnight smiled at one of her students getting through to the 3rd round. Shinso's teammates looked around, gripping their heads. Ojiro was visibly sweating, with a look of total loss in his eyes. The headband, but how? Monoma's other teammates looked around for the culprit. This is just coming in now. How unbelievable it is, folks. 4th place, the singular squad, Team Uzumaki. Present Mike bellowed, followed by the unbelieving shouts of the crowd. All of the competing students' heads shot in the direction of the masked blonde. Naruto lazily slouched with 5 headbands around his neck and a look of boredom across his face. No way! I didn't even see him. Holy shit. He fooled the hero course students. I just lost all my betting money. Sexy. A wave of chance started to build, seeing the lazy underdog pull off what everyone doubted he had a chance at. Uzumaki, Uzumaki, Uzumaki. Can you hear that, Japan? The stadium is erupting for Class 1C's Naruto Uzumaki. A truly captivating performance, and we didn't even see him. President Mike exclaimed throughout the entire stadium. And finally in fifth and the last qualifying spots, Team Midoriya. All Might sighed in relief at that announcement. His student had barely scraped by. Kigo whistled in amazement. Damn, what a finish! The remaining students zoned in on the lone Uzumaki, lazily standing with his hands in his pockets. No visible sweating or marks of struggle. It was like he didn't even try. Who the fuck is this guy? An enraged Katsuki Bakugo pointed vengefully. With Team Todoroki, they all looked guardingly at the masked blonde. They didn't even see him fight or anything. With being preoccupied with Bakugo and Midoriya, there was no room for them to worry about the other teams. Even this late in the competition, Naruto Uzumaki was an unknown quirk user, with unknown capabilities. He was stoic and impossible to read, so what would they do from here if they had to fight him? How could have so many teams lost to one person? Momo asked in apprehension. Wei, Kaminari walked around with his thumbs up. Shoto narrowed his eyes at the UA Gen Ed student. He came in last deliberately so that everyone would write him off as unworthy of our attention. He took advantage at everyone turning a blind eye to his presence. The half-hot, half-cold quirk user grit his teeth slightly. But why? What does he have to gain doing all that? Ida asked more to himself than his teammates. Momo looked at the blonde boy who was talking quietly with the other boy who qualified from 1C. I think I get it, he was studying our quirks, our strengths and weaknesses, maybe even habits too. We were doing what he wanted the entire time and now he can capitalize on our mistakes in the finals. She looked down nervously at her shoes, just as she was gaining some confidence in her abilities. Someone like him had to humble her once more. Shoto stood quietly as he glared over at his father who was talking on the phone and pointing at the student who took the crowd by storm. At least the fool's attention wasn't on him, in the end. I could care less about that. I only care about Midoriya making me use my left half. Let's go. The half and half hero student motioned for his teammates to follow. They nodded reluctantly and left, but not before sending one more glance at the Gen Ed Uzumaki who looked on lazily. It was like he didn't see anyone else as a threat. They never felt so inferior since they've been at UA, and to a Gen Ed student no less. Wei, Kaminari, with Team Bakugo. How did the damn extra make it this far? Bakugo boiled in rage with his eyes glowing red. His teammates quickly stepped away from him. He was destined to explode. Kirishima, the hardening quirk user, knew Bakugo reacted more out of disbelief than anger. He was getting better at picking up on his classmates' mood swings. That guy really stole the show. He didn't even come in first, but just because he was by himself, Uzumaki is now a fan favorite. Mina Ashido, the acid quirk user, agreed. Am I the only one who's kind of afraid of him? I mean, look at the teams he took from. They looked terrified. Team Tsunatori, Rin, Kodai and Monoma were all talking quietly, but none more passionately than Monoma's squad. Siro, the Tate quirk user, frowned and thought maybe we should ask them about what happened. Without much hesitation, he ambled towards the 1B kids. I guess it couldn't hurt. Kirishima and Mina followed closely, leaving Bakugo to brood. Hey Monoma, right? I'm sorry you guys didn't advance. I hope there are no hard feelings between us, but we just wanted to ask. The Class 1B group sharpened and turned to one of the teams who stole headbands from them. Uzumaki took your headband, right? They all nodded. We were wondering how he did it. Monoma hated Class 1A, it was downright factual. But even if he did tell them, it wouldn't change anything. We don't know. The copy quirk user looked directly at the three, the cocky smirk gone from his face. What? But you fought him. The red-haired hardening quirk user's eyebrows shot to his forehead. Monoma grits his teeth. He took our headband, and even with 4 of us watching different directions we still lost it. There was no fight. It was like we never had it in the first place. The 3 members of Team Bakugo stood frozen in disbelief. Just how strong is this guy? They didn't even know they were attacked. Monoma was no pushover and even they didn't stand a chance against Uzumaki, Kirishima thought. With Team Midoriya, Izuku was panicking. He completely ignored All Might's request. He underestimated someone because he was always being underestimated. He failed to remember it could happen to him. He paid the price for being an idiot, and now it left him and his teammates at a disadvantage for the next round. Stupid, 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 stup dash. Deku-kun, don't blame yourself. We just got outsmarted, okay? Ochako grabbed his hands to calm him down. Tokoimi was confused. Did they know something he didn't? Midoriya, what does she mean by that? The sentient shadow quirk user asked lowly. The one for all successor turned to the bird-faced teenager. Before the sports festival, we were warned to watch out for Naruto Uzumaki, seeing him come in all beaten up after the obstacle race. I thought that it was just a fluke. I know what it is like to be underestimated, yet I did the same thing. Now he knows all of our quirks and abilities, but we know none of his. I'm sorry, Deku cried with tears in his eyes. Mei Hatsum, the support course girl, ignored the conversation and continued operating on her babies. Tokoyami expected more from Midoriya if he was being honest with himself, but he also fell for the ploy, so there was really no blame to be placed but on themselves. They were hero students, and they needed to use this as a lesson. It was better now than out in the real world. Well, now we know. Regretting your decision will only stir more regret. Hopefully none of us get him as an opponent for the third round. Until then, let us forge ahead and prepare for the worst, the shadow quirk user sagely lectured. Deku and Ochako comically shook their fist in a unified motion, right? In response, Tokoyami just sweat dropped. Pro Hero Lounge. Naruto-kun has that kind of super strong and mysterious vibe going for him. I wonder if he would intern at my agency or perhaps even a date/MT. Lady pinched her chin in thought, not noticing the looks of dismay scrounging around the room. On the screen, Midnight, Naruto and Shinso conversed. Both boys stared boringly in her direction. The men couldn't understand how they kept it together in front of her. They were hormonal teenagers and yet they didn't stare at her jugs. Back in the arena, Nemuri congratulated them briefly, trying not to take up much time so that she wasn't accused of throwing the competition for her students. She licked her lips in Naruto's direction, making him tilt his head in confusion. Midnight pouted a little at still not being able to fluster the teenage boy. I'm very proud of you boys. I know I'm supposed to be neutral, but you both blew away everyone's expectation. Remember, it's not over yet. You still have a chance to get a hero course spot. Good luck. She slapped her whip into her other hand, swinging her hips as she walked away. Shinso struggled with her seductiveness, but ultimately kept his gaze forward and up. Shaking himself from his stupor, Hitoshi turned to face Naruto. Well, I guess we are enemies from here on out, the brainwashing quirk user stated boringly, but with a hint of excitement. However, Naruto decided to confront Shinso about his decision to not brainwash him. Why didn't you use your quirk on me? Huh, what are you talking about? Naruto stared at the boy skeptically. Before the round, I responded to your question. Why didn't you use your quirk on me? The purple-haired teenager shook his head. Oh, that, what would be the point? The brainwashing quirk user looked towards where the Gen Ed students were in the crowd. Being in Gen Ed, you start to realize that most of us want to be in the hero course. Although I could have used my quirk to get you into the finals, it would have been a false victory for you. You can't get into the hero course with someone else's power. I've learned that lesson quite a few times. Don't take it as pity or anything. I just wanted to see what you had planned, to be honest. Shinso smirked at the blonde. I can't lie though. In the end, when President Mike kept screaming about lost headbands, you had me pretty shaken. I suppose I should thank you then. The equally tall Shinso waved him off. There's nothing to thank. Letting you run loose might have saved my spot in the finals. I don't want you to call in a favor later when you change your mind, so I'm going to tell how I got into UA. Naruto lazily placed his hands into his pockets. You being recommended by a pro hero is definitely not difficult to guess. That's what UA recommendation means. The purple-eyed hero stewed and scoffed playfully. The stormy blue-eyed teenager gave his classmate a blank look. I wasn't really recommended. It was more like I was drafted by UA's principal. Shinso looked quizzically at him before motioning him to continue. A teacher here knew who I was because of an incident a few months back. I'm guessing if I said no what I was offered, I would be in juvie or something. That's because, before I came to UA I was a villain. The world silenced around them. What? Shinso asked, truly surprised and a tad frightened. He unconsciously took a warning step back. I'll tell you all in good time. But the teachers are aware of it, so don't worry. There's a reason for why I'm here. A reason that I can't really say. He exhaled slowly, waiting for a response. Shinso sighed heavily, as if he was holding his breath. Shit, how the hell were you a villain? Hitoshi did not expect any of that. Naruto smiled shortly, his half-lidded eyes closing into U-shapes. Don't worry about it. His tone stayed even and lackadaisical, unsurprisingly to Hitoshi. What did I expect? The purple-haired teenager asked rhetorically. Hitoshi groaned and looked away, catching someone's eye briefly. A girl he remembered from 1A shuffled off quickly, as if she had just been caught red-handed. You know, because of my quirk, a lot of people expected me to be a villain, so, instead of being one, I guess I can live with being associated with you. Shinso extended his fist. The blonde, teleportation quirk user, met the fist head-on. Which direction did that girl go? The brainwashing quirk user looked at him with a quirk eyebrow. Over by the 1A entrance tunnel. Why? How did he know someone was watching us? Hitoshi thought. With Team Todoroki, Momo tasked herself with finding out what the Uzumaki was up to, creating covert listening devices. She was able to pick their conversation from afar. She couldn't believe how casually they talked about the cavalry battle. Was it all a joke to them? But when she went to turn off her device, seeing as either of them really said anything important, Naruto Uzumaki let his villain status slip. Flashback a couple minutes before. Static I static asterisk am static a villain. Her eyes shot wide, panic throbbing in her heart. How could this be? With all the precautions UA took, how could a villain be here? Fixing the throttle on the static cleanser, she lowered her head to accustom the ignition. As she raised her head, the gloomy eyes of Hitoshi Shinso narrowed in on her. Flashback and, unexpectedly, she had been caught in the act and ran for her team to tell them what she witnessed. They could then go to their teacher or some hero close by. Oh God, what if Shinso was in on it? If he finds out, he might kill me. She panicked and scrambled towards Todoroki and Ida, watching Kaminari walk around retardedly. Ida-san, Todoroki-san, help! Both heads shot in her direction. Seeing the look of abject terror in Momo's eyes clearly told them something was very wrong. Yayaruza-san! Are you okay? What's wrong? Ida gripped her shoulders as she looked like she was about to faint. Shoto held her around the waist with one arm to support her weight. With tears welling in her eyes, she sobbed out, I was trying to get some sort of hint on Uzumaki's quirks, so I built listening devices. He told the other 1C student that he was a. She stuttered at the end, trying to formulate the right words. Shoto held her firmly. Calm down, Yayaruza-san, you can tell us. It's alright. Yamamoto leaned back into her classmate's shoulder. He said he was a villain. Both of her teammates' eyes widened dramatically. But I don't understand how none of the teachers suspect him. Tears streamed down her unblemished skin steadily. Todoroki and Ida looked at each other in shock. A villain here now? Shoto was about to speak, before an eerily lazy voice broke the constant sobbing. Oh, so this is where you ran off to? I knew someone was watching me. Todoroki and Ida put Momo behind them protectively. As they looked around them, no hero or person was in sight. The corridor was dark and humid, meant only for the transition from the locker room to the field. It was the worst position they could be in for quirk users who thrived in open spaces. Realizing they were entirely alone, their lives would be on the line right now. No All Might, no Aizawa-sensei, no heroes, just a villain and hero students. Todoroki and Ida stared down the dark hallway that interconnected many of the stadium tunnels. Standing with the light outlining his body and the contrast hiding his face, was Naruto Uzumaki. Momo stood shivering, but still adept in order to fight the villain she had uncovered. All three had trouble wrapping their heads around the simplicity in which the masked blonde had infiltrated their ranks. The thought of him fooling their teachers and pro-heroes was baffling. Their own sensei had seemed particularly fond of him, so how could someone their age fool such high-attentive heroes? If so, then they were beyond outmatched. Uzumaki, how did you do it? The half-and-half user emotionlessly questioned. The blonde seemed, in a way, confused by such a blunt statement. I'm afraid I don't understand. I just wished to see where Yayaruza-san had scurried off to. She did seem pretty frightened after all. Naruto slouched. Tenya pushed his glasses up, never leaving his fighting stance. The turbo quirk user patiently waited for an opening. No, Uzumaki-san, Todoroki-kun means, how did a villain get into UA? How could one such as yourself convince so many pro-heroes, including Aizawa-sensei, that you were not? The tall black-haired boy said with a hint of malice. Naruto frowned under his mask. Convince? I did no such thing. I believe you misunderstand. They all already know who and what I was. Team Todoroki's eyes collectively widened, although Shoto kept himself together better. I don't understand, you said was as if in past tense. Momo shrieked. I know what I said, my past is my own, no need to act so shocked, we all have our secrets, isn't that right Todoroki-san? The fire and ice user narrowed his eyes dangerously. The Uzumaki's voice stayed stoic and unaffected, even as the look of pure hatred lit up the UA student's face. Why should we believe such pitiful lies villains are so clandestine to use? Shoto said objectively. The masked blonde gave no retort. It is nothing of the sort, just ask Aizawa-san. He is the one who brought me here. After all, the disbelief hung truly amongst the UA hero students. But Aizawa-sensei is a hero, why would he engift such trust upon you? Villains don't just stop committing crimes. They are arrested and sent to atone for their sins, so how could you just be cleared to walk freely knowing of your past? Momo asked instinctively. Naruto stuck his hands into his pockets. I guess you wouldn't understand, but that is to be expected. UA heroes are taught to see black and white, to save in the light but not the dark. Why is that when the cameras turn off, heroes completely disregard people like me who called for help? I was a villain because I had no other choice. That is why. I'm trying to be a hero now. Aizawa-san saved me and showed me another way, a way in which I wouldn't have to suffer anymore. He gave me a chance. Atoning for my sins is why I'm here. And I won't be stopped in my mission? The masked blonde said lazily, but with a hint of anger. Momo recoiled slightly, bowing her head in pity. Mission? Ida questioned confusingly. The blonde nodded his head slightly. Yes, how could I prove myself if I didn't have the best hero students in Japan groveling at my feet? You come from families famously divine to the hero world or in wealth. Your chances are many more numerous than my own. But how impressive would it be for an orphan with only one to decimate an entire hero course filled with countless chances? That is my mission. Naruto spoke slowly and condescendingly. Shoto scoffed, spoken like a true villain. Greed runs deep within you and you don't even see it, he said with a shake of his head. None would believe me if I said I was doing it for countless others anyway. It means no difference to me. I don't need validation from those who would never understand. The Uzumaki turned and began to walk away. The white and red-haired teenager quizzically peered at the retreating form. So what is your true objective then? He asked the blonde to stop. Naruto turned his head to where only one blue orb peeked through the rays of light. It is the same as everyone else here, to beat the best of the hero classes in front of Japan, he said monotonously before continuing his motion. Wait. You think you can just leave after admitting you were a villain? It is our duty as future heroes to apprehend such people. Ida yelled towards the retreating form, banging his fist into his palm. Todoroki held an arm up, extending across Tenya's chest, keeping him in place. Enough, you heard him. He wasn't lying, far from it. We need to go justify this story with Aizawa-sensei and the others, Shoto said passively. Ida and Momo's shaking legs released their tension as they stumbled, but kept listening to Todoroki. They almost had to fight an ex-villain right after getting out of the USJ incident. The misunderstanding the developed black-haired girl had stumbled upon could have caused another incident with a somewhat innocent party. Although begrudgingly, Ida nodded and marched off with his head down. He couldn't take someone disrespecting Yue like that, even if it was someone Aizawa-sensei had saved. Yaoyorozu stared at the now empty tunnel from which Naruto had arrived. Yaoyorozu-san? Todoroki asked as he saw the now tear-stained face of his fellow classmate. I accused someone of such a foul act, and he never even raised his voice. Are we in the wrong, Todoroki-san? She said dispassionately. The half-and-half user was having the same thoughts. No, you did what you thought was right. Coming to us was not a wrong choice. He has given me some things to think about as well, he said coolly, leaving the petrified girl. With one last look down the empty tunnel, Momo soon followed. Uzumaki-san says he wants to be a hero, but not the type everyone expects one to be. What does that mean? She thought finally. With Class 1A, given a short time for the finalists to compose themselves and regain their strength, Shoyuta Aizawa decided to gather his students. Inside the original locker room 1A had used for their introduction, the UA Heroes students waited patiently. Some talked quietly with their classmates, while others focused on their future battles. For some reason, the entirety of Team Todoroki was on edge, and their blatant discomfort rang loudly throughout the room. What's with the long face, Momo? The final round hasn't even started yet. The acid quirk user, Mina, sang cheerfully, even if she wasn't nearly the smartest in the room. The pink-haired girl read the mood quite well. As if snapped from a trance, the creation quirk user downplayed her nerves with a forced smile. I was just, strategizing, she said unconvincingly. Is it about that? Kaminari whispered rather loudly. Said gesture made most of the room fixate themselves on the girl. What's that, Denki? Kyokujiro, the earphone jack quirk user, questioned the nervously sweating boy. Oh ha ha ha, you heard that? He laughed anxiously, keeping his palm on the back of his neck. Jiro looked quizzically between the two. Well, whatever it is, shouldn't it be best to get it off your chest? She offered politely, trying not to sound eager. The well-endowed UA student nodded. Well, it's not as easy as that, this is different, she responded. Kyoka-san is right. Being a UA student means we look after each other. You can't go beyond plus ultra by yourself, Deku added his forethought. Although he might have been just as nervous, maybe helping someone else through their own ordeals would shape up his own. I don't believe I'm nervous for the finals. No, I think I'm nervous for a certain person in it, the creation quirk user simplified. 1A looked at her puzzlingly. Sure, Todoroki and Bakugo are crazy strong, but that shouldn't make one of their classmates this petrified. It wasn't like one of them was out to slay her or anything. Okay, maybe Bakugo would, thought Kyoka. What do you mean? Most of the finalists are hero course students, so are you telling us you're scared of either a pacifist, a doppelganger Kirishima, or one of the two Gen Ed students? Siro joined in, curiosity getting the best of him. Momo's gaze dropped to her feet. Yes, and for a good reason. You see, Todoroki-san, Ida-san, and I were confronted by Naruto Uzumaki, and he used to be. The locker room door had closed unexpectedly, halting her midway. A villain? Yes, he was. The occupants of the locker room shot towards the voice of their teacher, eyes wide as saucers reflected the dire shock the room received. A villain? How did you allow him to enter if he was a known villain? Kirishima exclaimed. The black-haired teacher sighed audibly. Due to certain circumstances surrounding Uzumaki, I recommended him. It was I who vouched for him, Aizawa beseeched. The resounding looks he received were comical. Many gazed at him through squinted eyes, presuming to measure whether their teacher had taken a nosedive off the deep end. Of course, he didn't blame them. From day one, kids everywhere were told the rudimentary classifications of heroes being good, while villains were bad. That was the simplified and stereotypical draw that even most of society still followed to this day. Throughout his time as a hero, he had seen so many neglect this oversimplification. As a hero, many held this stereotype true to their hearts, because, well, it was their job. They were paid to keep the villains off the streets, even if there were people in foul business begrudgingly. Naruto had fallen victim to the system that had been working against him since day one. Orphan, poor, and barely able to feed himself early in his teens, nobody was coming to save him. Even he wouldn't have found the blonde Gaki if it wasn't for plain luck, and that fact held true for many others like himself. Heroes saved people in danger, not people in need. It was the cruel truth that many had blinded themselves to. Villains were people acting out of greed or self-interest. Naruto was acting out of desperation to feed himself and the ability to sleep with a roof over his head. Realizing what he had missed most of these years, it filled him with unbridled distaste for himself and the hero system. Naruto was trying to change that confiture by being the darkness, not in villainy, but discovering what the light fails to see. But sensei, why would you do that? Ojiro, the tail quirk user asked slowly, sweat dripping from his temples. Aizawa stared at the blonde boy with bloodshot eyes. I saw potential for something better than he was. Tokoimi added his own thoughts. I see, you caught him and gave Uzumaki an ultimatum. The dark shadow quirk user crossed his arms over his chest habitually. The black-haired hero scoffed lowly. No, he left before I had the chance. He was untraceable, until he was found once more a little over a week ago. Huh! How can a kid our age go off the grid like that? Even evading you, Aizawa-sensei, it seems kind of far-fetched. Sato, the sugar rush quirk user, spoke in skepticism. Aizawa himself didn't know, but Naruto was deathly calculating and smart. With the limited knowledge of his existence, the masked Gaki used said inclination to his advantage. I know how it sounds, but it is true. Whether you choose to believe that or not, the facts still remain, he said boringly. I still can't get over the fact that he's a villain. I mean, what if this is some ultimate ploy to take out one of the hero students? Uraraka nodded bubbly at Midoriya taking over. Shoyuta tilted his head sleepily to the one for all successor, even if that was a possibility. Problems such as those are for the pro heroes to uncover. Plus, taking out a hero student in the middle of a stadium filled with heroes is extremely foolish. Think with your head, not your gut. Midoriya, All Might's protege, embarrassingly slid back in his seat. Mineta was shaking in his seat and crying loudly, Aizawa-sensei. If he's bloodthirsty. WWH, what if he kills one of the girls in the final round? We can't let that happen. The purple ball-head boy cried with secret glances at his girl classmates. Many of them discreetly covered themselves. They wouldn't put it past Mineta to discover X-ray vision. Eraserhead ignored the easily frightened student. Enough talk. I came in here to give a brief rundown for the finalists. If you focus on one person, you're destined to get blindsided by the rest. Do not make that mistake. Now, as you know already, Tetsu and Shiozaki are two strong 1B students. Underestimating them will be your own undoing. You are still being scouted for agencies, so don't make a fool of yourself and push carelessly past your outermost limits. Seeing the nodding from most of his finalists, he continued on. The Gen Ed students are fairly unknown to you. I cannot interfere besides providing you advice, therefore, do not allow their ranking in UA to fool you. Shinso and Uzumaki made it this far for a reason. Treating them like the media portrays the other courses. And you'll be tasting cement quickly, Eraserhead advised his students carefully. Team Todoroki sat silent through it all. The others didn't come face to face with the blonde Gen Ed student. Although a brief encounter, his convictions were stronger than their own, and an idealistic person is a dangerous person. They knew most of their classmates would still go out and forget every single piece of advice Aizawa gave them, but they wouldn't. Naruto Uzumaki was a deceivingly strong and potentially dangerous contender. Their chances at higher agencies could be extinguished by a single person, and that frustrated them. He knew everything about them, but they in return knew nothing about him. It was unnerving, and even if they told the others, Uzumaki was too nonchalant in his behavior to seem like he was a troublesome opponent. If that is all, then good luck. I will be in my usual spot and your section will be in Sector 10A with the other hero students. Do not disappoint. Many are still here to see what this class can do. With that being said, Aizawa left, letting his competing students compose themselves on their own. Slung over his shoulder was his yellow sleeping bag, swishing in anticipation of the sleepy underground hero. Kyoka looked around at her classmates. Am I the only one here mildly concerned about having an ex-villain in the tournament? She questioned abruptly. Not many besides Momo and Ida seemed mildly concerned. Unfortunately, being attacked by villains in their first semester of UA was already enough in their book. It was probably an unspoken rule to take these kinds of things in stride. It's okay if you're scared, Jiro. You got a cool guy like me to protect you, the blonde electrification quirk user to her side said while pointing to himself confidently. That earned him an earful of unrelenting sound waves, shaking and vibrating the poor blonde into submission. However, if one looked closely, a light shade of pink dusted her pale cheeks. Yeah, whatever, she growled. With Class 1B's Tetsu and Shiozaki, the Steel and Vine quirk users stood silently as their homeroom teacher, Vlad King, made his appearance for the final time. Shiozaki, Tetsu, under my guidance, I have taught you to destroy Class 1A and I have faith that you will succeed. Blood Hero, Vlad King, praised his only two finalists from his course. Tetsu yelled out in a battle cry, slightly scaring the green vine-haired girl beside him. Ibra gently raised her hand. But Ken-sensei, I don't want to destroy anybody. I will humbly win over any 1A student, but I don't want to really hurt any of them, she claimed angelically. Right, anyway, that is not all. If you face Naruto Uzumaki, do not, I seriously mean, do not underestimate him. No matter his position in the school, Uzumaki is by far the most skilled in the finals. Both students looked incredibly shocked at seeing their teacher praise another class. Tetsu growled, Sekijiro-sensei. So what if he scraped by in the second round? He's hiding his quirk because it isn't as strong as ours. At least that's what Monoma told me. The steel quirk user raged indiscriminately. No! He gripped both his students' shoulders. No, I can't reveal other students' capabilities with their quirk. But I will tell you this. Uzumaki is extremely calculating. He may not look very enthusiastic, but I can bet he already knows the ins and outs of your quirks. Play it smart. You still have a chance for a top agency. And if you ruin it now by attacking an unknown opponent hastily, those probabilities will cease. His students glanced at each other with raised eyebrows. Was the blonde really this tough of an opponent? If he was, then why wasn't he in the hero course? Don't worry, Sekijiro-sensei. Ibara-chan and I won't let you or Kendo-san down, the pointy-toothed boy proclaimed to the ceiling above him. I believe you, now go beat 1A, and the Gen EDS. The large hero pushed the UA hero students along towards the arena to discover who they were going to fight first. In the arena, Midnight and Cementos had begun the preparation for the final stage. The stadium was overflowing with eager heroes looking for interns and sidekicks, along with news reporters finding any tight gap they could cast from online. Betting on the winner of the entire tournament had continuously updated since the first round. Shoto Todoroki and Katsuki Bakugo led the odds, followed by Izuku Midoriya, Momo Yaoyorozu, and Fumikage Tokoemi. Although Naruto Uzumaki had proved he belonged in the hero course after his placement in the cavalry battle, many still doubted his combat skills. Unfortunately for the internet gamblers, betting on an underdog, no matter how tempting, was ignorant, knowing he hadn't shown his quirk yet. The finalists from the final 3 classes arrived in separate tunnels. Once more, Present Mike did not disappoint with his commentary. Now, let's hear it for the contenders from the 1A hero course. The voice quirk user received a thunderous eruption of cheers. 1A will feature 11 of the 16 slots. Yeah! Introducing the competitors: Katsuki Bakugo, Shoto Todoroki, Izuku Midoriya, Momo Yaoyorozu, Fumikage Tokoemi, Ochako Uraraka, Denki Kaminari, Mina Ashido, Ejiro Kirishima, Tenya Ida, and Hanta Siro. Such a dynamic and powerful group of young UA hero students. The crowd exploded in delight for the group they were all here to see, though confusingly to the 1A students. Some loud boos from the direction of their section rang loud and unrelenting. Wow! If that wasn't enough, then keep it up for the 1B students, Tetsu and Ibara Shiozaki. The gray-haired teenager flexed in excitement, completely stealing the spotlight from his classmate. The loud boos were now gone, instead, entirely replaced by loud chants bellowing throughout the arena. Oh, just you wait, ladies and gentlemen. Don't forget about the local UA tech genius Mei Hatsum from the support course. Power Loader spotted a smile for his student who basked in the glory, showing off her babies to the tech companies. Coming into the sports festival, no one had given the hero courses a challenge from all 3 years. But that is not the same for these young men. These are the first general education students to make the final round in 10 years. Introducing the Gen Ed underdogs, Hitoshi Shinso and Naruto Uzumaki. Whoops and hollers from around the stadium sang relentlessly. Everybody loved an underdog story. And although not many expected the boys to get far, they had done impressively well for themselves. Shinso and Naruto walked side by side, one with a deadpan, the other with a lazy strut. The two were conversing quietly, though they never looked in each other's direction. Without context, you'd think they were the ones being challenged, not the other way around, Deku thought. As they approached, Midnight nodded in their direction with a smile. For a reason she did not know, Namuri felt such motherly pride seeing Japan cheer Naruto's name. Even though they had only known each other for so long, the blonde had really made a mark on her. Although he was a tad apathetic and needed lots and lots of personal connection, she couldn't help but feel motivated to be that person. She was getting older, and never tried for that stage of her life. Although she still could, Namuri would never force herself to love someone she didn't. Having a child was a 2-person job. And she still hasn't found that special someone. Hearing about how Naruto grew up on his own without the love of a parental or familial figure was heartbreaking. Even now, he was still alone and was probably used to the quiet loneliness that she felt as well. Just thinking about it, maybe they could fill those gaps in each other's lives that they were longing for. Of course, she would never force herself into his life, literally only knowing him for a week. But given enough time and the right words, she could be a maternal figure for him to seek compassion and guidance in. Oh, youth! The seductress giggled and squirmed. She was getting ahead of herself again. But something like that didn't seem so far out of reach. A crack of a whip broke the eerie silence on the field. All right. The competitors' names have been generated and filtered throughout a 16-man, 1v1, single elimination bracket. Winners move onwards. While still being able to show their potential to hero agencies, kill shots and aggressive shows of violence are strictly forbidden and will be monitored closely by Cementos, our on-floor proctor. Without needing to say more, The dominatrix-fitted woman twisted her body towards the screen behind her. Here's the lineup for the first round, remember and strategize. We will have a 10-minute increment before the first fight. Displayed upon the screen were the matchups, which received rowdy shouts from the crowd. Match 1. Hitoshi Shinso vs. Izuka Midoriya. Match 2. Hanta Siro vs. Shoto Todoroki. Match 3. Ibara Shiozaki vs. Denki Kaminari. Match 4. Mei Hatsum vs. Tenya Ida. Match 5. Naruto Uzumaki vs. Mina Ashido. Match 6. Momo Yaoyorozu vs. Fumikage Tokoyami. Match 7. Ijiro Kirishima vs. Tetsu. Match 8. Katsuki Bakugo vs. Ochako Uraraka. Naruto passively gazed upon the screen. Mina Ashido, the acid quirk user. Shinso was going against Midoriya. Yet the blonde felt the brainwashing quirk user would display his talents well. The black and green-haired boy was easily aggravated by those who belittle his power and easily flustered about his comparison to All Might's own quirk. In the end, it didn't matter who was placed before him in a match. Aizawa and Yui gave him a task to complete, and he would fulfill his obligation. There may be some potentially strong future heroes in this class, but none had the fighting capability he held. He wanted to try some of the newfound abilities of his quirk as well, nothing too powerful yet, but they were still strong nonetheless. It was small, but he was getting a bit more excited than normal. Hitoshi approached the lazily placed blonde, having shown no reaction to his matchup, although he had only known Uzumaki for a short amount of time. It was nearly impossible to presume what he was thinking to himself. His emotions were kept sealed tightly beneath his expressionless facade. He was silently thanking the generator for placing him on the opposite end of the bracket. Shinso disliked people who were gifted with the amazing abilities you'd see in the hero course. All of those people never had to struggle for acceptance like he had, and that frustrated him the most out of anything. He could tell Naruto had a great quirk, and a powerful one bar none, but that same jealousy and wanting for another's position was lost on the blonde. He operated like himself, even with the capabilities that his unknown quirk had, so how could he hate someone struggling with that same dilemma, especially since being a villain, as Naruto had told him, discarded him through the most difficult path. 2 villainous quirks against 14 others loved by their entire home country. It was something written out of a story. Although it sounded pretty cliché, and he bet Naruto would agree with that. Uzumaki, let's go. I want a little time to myself before the match, the purple-haired teenager spoke. The others were still fixated on the screen and their own thoughts. Some were satisfied, while others were petrified to learn they'd be facing someone stronger than them. The masked blonde nodded and followed alongside his classmate towards their course's locker room. As he continued on, he ignored the eyes of the few who kept their attention on him. Todoroki had run into his father and Midoriya earlier. He hated the fact that with the upcoming fights, that he might have to use his left side. If there was one thing he hated the most in this world, it would be the constant shadow of his father's will looming over his head. He could feel the tempting blaze, blistering beneath his skin. Trying to balance his frost, he didn't want to resort to his power. No, it was the last thing he would ever do. Even with powerful opponents like Bakugo and Midoriya, he would never use it unless he absolutely had to. He wanted to prove a point. But then there's someone like Uzumaki, who doesn't look like a threat, but after actually talking to him, he wouldn't disregard his worth like everyone else. Momo hesitantly glanced in the masked blonde's direction. She wasn't the best at reading people's facial expressions, but the creation quirk user saw nothing. The only visible features on his face were his eyes and hair, and trying to pick the smallest glimpse of emotion resulted in failure. The sports festival was meant for her to gain some confidence in her quirk. Overthinking and assimilating too much never brought about success for her. Going against Tokoyami was going to be hard enough, but having to fight against the blonde if she won. She had a nagging feeling in head telling her to avoid him. He was an ex-villain. If he evaded Aizawa-sensei, then he was destined to be a vigorous foe. Losing severely on such an immense stage in front of heroes in the entirety of Japan would definitely collapse her sanity. Nevertheless, Naruto Uzumaki was the last person she wanted to face. The one-for-all successor tried to create a profile on Naruto Uzumaki. Anything to give him and his classmates an advantage. Unfortunately, he found absolutely nothing. Deku briefly studied his mannerisms, his battle tactics for the cavalry battle, and was left with nothing in his hero notebook. Knowing what he looked like held no advantage in a competition like this. And even worse, no one even saw him using a quirk yet. He wanted nothing more than to be a hero like All Might, to save people with a smile on his face. And he completely ignored All Might's advice about the Uzumaki, and it made him look foolish. He was the epitome of the underestimated, and even he was left wondering how the blonde had gotten so far without revealing anything in his arsenal. Uzumaki operated like a villain in a hero school. It was ironic now with the revealing fact that the masked blonde actually was an ex-villain. He would be wrong if he didn't feel a bit intimidated. But All Might entrusted his quirk to him, and he wouldn't fail his hero twice. Bakugo scoffed at the others being thrown off guard. Uzumaki had already beaten the others with his mind games. However, he was not so easily fooled by undermining tactics. Ex-villain or not, he was going to die. Top 10 pro heroes. What's up with that? There's other opponents than just him, you know. The bunny hero Mirko yelled and waved at the students who couldn't hear her. Down on the field, all of the finalists stared at the back of Naruto Uzumaki as he returned to his locker room. Many gave him wary glances and kept their distance relatively far from where he was. I mean, he did get into the finals on his own, but is that really necessary? Shield Hero, Crust, laughed awkwardly. Kigo kept his hands behind his head. There was no point in fussing over stuff like this. Although he was a tad curious, the UA students were giving Uzumaki the wide berth, yet he never really deserved such an action. Maybe there was more than what they were seeing. He was a teenager once too, so they probably had some dramatic school affair going on. Yagi Tashinori, or All Might, sat quietly, sweating slightly. He could see the resolve bristling in his student, yet even now, he didn't know if young Midoriya would go to extreme lengths to prove himself worthy. The circumstances on the field were noticeably different. Assuming their homeroom teacher notified them of Uzumaki and his past endeavors. Could he really blame them though? The UA classes were fairly new to the way the hero world worked, and they had already seen villainy firsthand. Just classifying Uzumaki as an ex-villain inadvertently constructed the hero students to watch him carefully. All Might-san, we were informed you worked at UA now, so what has brought upon such treatment? I mean, he has performed impressively, but the others seem almost guarded around him, Best Jeanist speculated, getting the others to nod with him. Hawks turned a bored eye to the side. The number one hero laughed. Ha! There is a reason for it all. I have no doubt they will release the reason for why during the battles. Don't worry, the large man exclaimed, reimbursing into his muscular form. Gang Orca gazed puzzlingly at the top hero. So it is important then. I trust UA has it handled? The large sonic wave quirk user asked professionally. In return, the suit and tie hero got a blinding smile and a thumbs up. Hawks, however, was not satisfied with the sentiment. If All Might held secrecy with something, it was destined to be somewhat important, more or less. No matter the reason, the number 3 hero had his sights set on Naruto Uzumaki for an intern. To him, Uzumaki's potential was far above the rest. 15 minutes later, Midoriya and Shinso made their way to the center stage. Shouts of anticipation showered in from above, filling both participants with adrenaline. For them, this was the only chance they got to prove themselves. Shinso wanted to prove his quirk was more than its villainous ability. He longed to show he could save and fight as well. Midoriya wanted to prove to All Might and the hero world that he could be the next symbol of peace. Now that he had the power of a quirk, he could finally live up to the dream of being a hero. Beforehand, Ojiro had explained to Izuku the inner workings of Shinso's quirk. Using said knowledge, the One for All successor felt more confident in his ability to combat the Gen Ed student. In the UA section, Naruto watched silently from above. Since he was participating in the finals, the blonde was sandwiched between the 2 hero courses. Expectantly, the coordinators for the event weren't expecting finalists from the lower classes, so his seating was actually a row behind the 1B students. Currently, Monoma was giving him a stink eye, though far and few between, seeing as their class representative was behind him. The copy blonde was obviously a tad sore from his loss. From the masked blonde's perspective, it was nothing personal. He just needed his points. Of course, he could have targeted higher teams like Team Kendo and Team Bakugo, but there was no point putting himself in the spotlight. Nobody watches the lower teams, and he as a competitor took advantage of that. Congratulations Uzumaki-san on getting into the finals. You did really great. Itsuka Kendo, the big fist quirk user and 1B's class rep, bowed politely in praise. The masked blonde looked lazily at the girl turned around in her seat. She had long silky orange hair that was swept over her brow and the rest elegantly kept in a ponytail. Accompanying her tangerine-colored hair was gleaming emeralds and lightly tanned skin, accenting her beauty. Yes, overall to Naruto, she was quite beautiful. Naruto nodded his head in return. Thank you, you did particularly well yourself, the blonde said stoically. Confusingly to him, Kendo was completely flustered by his response. Monoma came to her rescue by opening his mouth. Kendo-san. Are you talking to the enemy? He beat my team to win, you know. Suddenly the orange-haired girl swung an enlarged fist at his head and successfully sat him back in his chair, though Naruto supposed he could have a head injury from such a heavy impact. Itsuka laughed awkwardly at Monoma's immature act. I apologize for him, it's just that some of our classmates were surprised to be beaten. A few of them thought you were targeting us for 1A's sake, the big fist quirk user said while rubbing her arm. I see. I took away some of the others' chances at getting recognition, and 1A is still seen as the superior class because of my choices. But regardless of that, I do think 1B is a collectively stronger unit than 1A, the masked blonde answered honestly, but never raising his face above expressionless. Overhearing their class rep's conversation, many turned their heads swiftly after Uzumaki called their class the strongest. They had only heard their homeroom teacher say that, and he's, well, extremely biased. As if magically healed from head trauma, Monoma's head shot up. Is that right? I do suppose we are pretty strong. 1A is just carried upon the shoulders of Todoroki and Bakugo. The rest of those clowns have no real talent. I mean, they seriously have a midget with balls on his head. The copy quirk user cockily smirked in the direction of the median between the two hero courses. The teleportation quirk user lazily kept his head forward with half-lidded, oceanic orbs. As I was saying, 1B has their strongest student in Nito Monoma and possibly their other strongest in Juzo Honuki and Ibara Shiozaki. They have much versatility in their quirks, especially Monoma-san, nonetheless. I don't believe anybody in this class won't have interchanging spots for the strongest. That being said, 1A has questionably specific quirks, while 1B has consistency and simplicity. Sometimes simple is best, and in this case, it is, the blonde monotonously drew out. Impossibly, the smug grin on Monoma's face threatened to split his face. Comically, the smugness seemed traceable amongst all the students, though some hid it more than the rest. Itsuka was dumbfounded by the blonde's compliment, although it didn't really sound convincing, seeing his face never break above a slightly raised eyebrow. Kendo had never seen such an emotionless-looking face before. No wonder people thought Uzumaki was Aizawa-san's son. Thank you? 1C has a really great contender in Shinso-san as well. Hopefully he can beat a hero course student. Itsuka lightly drifted everyone away from their smugness. Naruto nodded. Shinso will do well, but I don't think he will win, he said with a hint of annoyance. The orange-haired girl frowned slightly. Aren't you supposed to cheer on your classmate? He could win. You never know with this kind of stuff. Midoriya just happens to be the worst opponent for someone like Shinso. There is one thing the 1A boy can do, and should I say he is the best at it? The others stared at him strangely. 1B was a close-knit group, and the fact that Uzumaki was somewhat downplaying his classmate's chance was triggering. The masked blonde sighed. Unfortunately, I don't want things to end that way, but I hope he pulls out a victory. People like Shinso deserve a chance for the hero course and agencies as well, Naruto said with a hint of a smile completely hidden by his mask. Oh? Don't you deserve a chance as well? A girl with green hair bemusedly spoke from a row below Kendo's, Setsuna Tokage if he remembered correctly. Her quirk was fairly impressive from what he had seen of it. The blonde thought for a second. Deserve? No, they don't hold an obligation to give me anything. I will do my best with what I've got, and if I get recognized for my efforts, then so be it, he said intelligently. The orange-haired girl smiled at his logic. You're pretty cool, Naruto-san. We could have been friends before this, so why haven't I felt like I've seen you around UA before? The green-eyed girl mellowed out towards the end. Thank you. As to why you haven't seen me, I've only been at UA for a week, he simply stated, getting shocked faces in return. What? How's that possible? I thought that wasn't allowed unless you were recommended. Wait, you were recommended to the general education course? The big fist quirk user exclaimed, making some of the other 1B students' faces stretch to impossible quantities. Naruto sighed. Was it that big of a deal? He thought people got into the hero courses on recommendation pretty frequently. Yeah, it's too much of a drag to talk about though, he yawned, making a pineapple-haired shadow user sneeze somewhere out in the multiverse. Huh! You were pretty talkative a second ago. The steel quirk user yelled angrily. Surprisingly, it had been the first time he talked the entire time. However, witnessing the large rays first hovering above his head, he probably had a good idea as to why. Another troublesome woman, how lucky! The masked blonde's head gazed upon the slightly scary spectacle. From the general education course, we have an underdog, Hitoshi Shinso. President Mike waved his hands around, ultimately finishing in his signature pose. The crowd of heroes and citizens ate it all up, cheering and clapping for the impressive display shown so far. And from the hero course, the freckled menace, Izuku Midoriya. Yay! The mohawked hero yelled proudly through the stadium speakers. Ooh! It's about to start. Itsuka turned quickly, zeroing her eyes on center stage. Naruto wasn't much of a wishful thinker, he was a realist, calling it how it was. No matter how blunt, Shinso had a chance, and knowing the Deku boy, Hitoshi would lure him into a trap. After that, Shinso never had a game plan, and that was where he failed the most. He wasn't as strong or fast as his opponents, and relied solely upon his quirk. Like many others, brainwashing was a powerful tool, but making it the only thing you're good at versus someone who has a somewhat athletic build and endurance was destructive for Shinso, and his quirk had two weaknesses, one being the person had to respond to his speech, and two, his quirk's control was decimated by inflicting pain on the victim. If there was one thing Midoriya was good at, it was destroying his limbs with his impressively strong quirk. Cannon fight. Shinso is down. Midoriya with the excellent move at the end. The stadium applauded vehemently. Many were impressed with his willpower. On the ground, the purple-haired teenager grit his teeth venomously. What did he expect? He was destined to lose once more, as people with villainous quirks did. In the stands, wow! I really thought the Gen Ed guy had him. Tsuburaba, the solid air quirk user from 1B shouted while holding his head, as 1B rumbled to themselves about a Gen Ed nearly besting a hero student. Itsuka looked back at the blonde, sitting with his head in his palm like before. The Uzumaki seemed totally unfazed. However, based on how he was talking before the match, he already knew the outcome. So you knew it was going to end like that? That was what you meant by Midoriya being the worst opponent for him. He broke himself out of Shinso's brainwashing. The Tokage girl pointed at the masked blonde. As he looked upon the verge of snoozing, the bright blue-eyed teenager stoically raised his eyebrow. Yeah, lower your decibels, you're too loud, he said, showing the first signs of emotion besides stoicism. Team Monoma and Tetsu laughed after hearing his casual write-off of Tokage. Said girl looked at the boy embarrassingly, all trying to calm herself from wringing the necks of her classmates. Oh yeah? Well, your mask is stupid. I bet you're hiding your horribly ugly blimp lips. She bit back at the blonde, not letting him get the last laugh. Naruto quirked another eyebrow. Yes, something like that. Troublesome woman, he sighed while crossing his arms over his chest. Monoma and the others stared at each other, before breaking out in laughter once more at the stoic Uzumaki completely disregarding her. Nice one, Tokage-san. You almost had him. Monoma grinned at her, holding back his laughter. The green-haired girl looked dangerously in his direction. One collective gulp resounded from the group. For match 2 we have the highest overall student in the cavalry battle, Shoto Todoroki. The Class 1B students once again returned their attention to the field. For some, it saved them from the wrath of another scary woman in their class, and from the 1A as well, the elastic Hantasiro. President Mike howled. Ready, begin! Midnight announced with a crack of her whip, sending the resounding sections into a frenzy. Cannon battle, kind of. What the hell? Are you serious? Tetsu, the steel quirk user, shielded his face as eyes completely sprouted in front of their section. Such strength, his raw output levels are high above some pro heroes, although his attack patterns seem rather simplistic because no one has ever given him a real challenge. That is a major weakness, Naruto presumed, sitting silently behind the frightened hero students in front of him. Juzo, the softening quirk user, was sitting diagonally from Naruto Uzumaki. Out of the peripheral of his eyesight he could see the blonde conversing lightly since he sat down. When the massive attack came in from Todoroki, everyone, including himself, jumped to protect themselves, seeing the attack close in but finally stop. it sent a collection of relief throughout their class. Even if he wasn't paying attention for most of the time, being more concerned about himself, the blue-eyed masked student never flinched or moved from his original position. Watching the charging ice, everyone was sent into a fray. It was a basic survival instinct, a classic fight or flight, so why did Uzumaki seem so familiar with that feeling that he didn't even twitch a finger? Even with his lazy and stoic exterior, something inexplicably wrong was burrowed beneath. He was more than what met the eye, and that was why so many had underestimated him during the first 2 stages. It was intimidating to have someone like that competing for their spot in the hero course. His aptitude for deceit could be mistaken for a villain's. How did such a person as him get recommended for UA, knowing the characteristics of his person? I don't want to kill anyone, so could you change my name please? Hananuki was broken from his stupor by Shiozaki pleading for a name change. Okay. The wonderful and peaceful Ibra Shiozaki of 1B. An arena-wide sweat drop preceded the slight altercation in which the vine-haired girl of 1B was mistakenly introduced as assassin. Said student bowed politely in thanks, and replaced her smile with the serious facade, from the 1A hero course, introducing the electric Denki Kaminari. Once again, the cheering reached unreal levels, shaking the foundation of the UA arena. Kaminari has a potentially powerful quirk if he knew how to use it, but Shiozaki is much more in tune with her vines. This should be an easy victory for her. However, she holds a major weakness herself. She is a pacifist in a profession that calls for physical harm to your opponent. Naruto chided the 2 fighters as they now faced each other. Cannon battle. What was that 1A? I think he said he was going to beat her in 1 move. Monoma laughed maniacally, clinging to the barrier that separated the 2 hero classes. As expected, a giant fist gripped his midsection and dragged his cackling form back to his seat. Monoma was rightfully just in a way. Kaminari was beaten severely, and he's supposed to be sort of a troubling competitor. Okay. Let's keep it rolling with this next matchup. Coming from the support course, Tech Genius, Mei Hatsum, the pink-haired girl with the crosshair eyes, giggled and locked her eyesight on the Tech Corporation's booth. Present mic blared through the speakers. Don't forget the 1A speedster, Tenya Ida from the Ida family dynasty of heroes. The navy blue-haired teenager puffed his chest in pride. Cannon battle, kind of. Hatsum went through her entire repertoire of babies over the course of 15 minutes before stepping out of the ring. She showed very concerning commitment to the tech side of the hero world, but even Naruto had to give her props on her ingenuity. Her hydraulic-powered equipment would have beaten Ida if she was actually taking the fight seriously instead of showcasing her inventions to the luxurious tech companies. It was obvious her sights were on something else. Naruto stood up. His fight was next and they were allotted 5 minutes before the actual fight took place. He didn't really need the previously held locker rooms to calm himself, but he would allow it for his opponent, Mina Ashido. There wasn't anything exclusively powerful or challenging about her. She wasn't particularly powerful with her quirk, although it did have its diversity and effectiveness. Overall, she was barely above average in the class. There were a few others stronger than her in the final round and she was, unfortunately, just in the way. Good luck Uzumaki-san, you are going against a 1A student, so I don't doubt the others will root for you. Itsuka smiled at the stoic blonde. For a second, Naruto believed she was just saying it to be polite, but seeing a tinge of pink tint her tan skin confused him. I won't disappoint, thank you, he uttered with a lazy bow. As he started to walk away, he put his hands into his pockets, thinking about how he was going to finish the match. He didn't want to expose his quirk or have a long drawn-out match, so maybe he'd do that. Yes, he did want to try out his newest weapon in his arsenal. Regretfully, Ashido would be his guinea pig. Once he was out of hearing range, the green-haired girl from 1B peered at their class rep slyly. He's pretty cute, since no one else is interested in him. I might just ask him out on a dish. She was stopped towards the end by an uncharacteristic death stare from the orange cream-haired girl. No. I mean, he's probably not interested in anyone, so I wouldn't want you to get rejected for anything. Kendo chuckled, getting Tokage to grin wider. Oh? Thank you for telling me, Kendo-san. I wouldn't want to overstep my boundaries. Setsuna smirked toothly. Kendo smiled sickly sweet at her classmate. No worries, I wouldn't want someone to get hurt. Getting too close, she grumbled through her teeth. Seeing the stare-down between the girls, most of the 1B hero students moved a couple rows away, with Monoma trying to stay out of Kendo's eyesight. Waiting room 2. Naruto waited patiently at one of the tables, his head was held up by his fist, while his mind stared on dreamlessly. The creak of the door opening alerted his senses to a person entering the room. Wow, that wall must be very interesting, maybe I should give it a try. A distinctly feminine noise Naruto didn't recognize filtered throughout the mostly barren room. Peeking at the figure through his peripheral vision, he was met with a hero he had never been acquainted with before. She had an orange bandana draped over mint green hair, with a happy grin plastered on her lightly tanned skin. Her hero costume consisted of orange and green pinstripe pants, accompanied by a black sleeveless buttoned-up collar, yellow and orange gloves draped under silver bracers on her forearms, with an added smiley face belt plastered around her rather developed stature. Oh, that's right, Shida-kun probably doesn't talk about me. The woman pressed her fingers together with a small blush. The masked blonde knew Aizawa's first name was Shoyuta, but he didn't know he was in a relationship with somebody. I apologize for not recognizing Aizawa-san's significant other. Naruto slowly stood from his seat and bowed slightly at the now flustered woman. Haha, no worries, me and Shida-kun are getting married one day. She gave him a thumbs up with a beautiful smile. Although it was nice to meet Aizawa-san's fiancée, he was still confused as to why she was here. I don't mean to be rude, but did Aizawa-san send you or something? He said with the most perturbed and respectful voice he could muster. The smiling hero was definitely a large contrast from Aizawa's personality. A very large contrast at that. He wasn't here to question his mentor's taste in women, but she was very beautiful. Oh well, I owed him a favor, and he told me to tell you good luck and that he believes in your strength to show itself, she giggled out. There really wasn't any need to do that, but the sentiment made his chest fill with fierce determination. There weren't many people he trusted in the world, but Aizawa-san was definitely one of them. Underneath the intimidating visage of his image laid a caring, deeply morally run person. Naruto wondered how he acted in private with Dash. I forgot. How rude of me. My hero name is MS, joke, but you can call me Emi-chan. Shida-kun sounds very invested in you, so I will as well. Good luck and do your best. She slapped his shoulder before running off right back through the door. Yes, compared to the black-haired hero, Emi-chan was very bubbly. Thinking of the underground hero matching said characteristic made him shiver unconsciously. Gazing up at the clock above the door frame, the time shifted to 3:45, conveniently meeting his walkout time. In the arena, Mina walked up confidently with a smile on her face. She waved at the crowd the entire way, getting cheers and whistles for her entrance. She was a proud hero student and wanted to do her best to get a hero agency internship. After hearing Aizawa-sensei confirm that Naruto Uzumaki was indeed an ex-villain, she couldn't help but gulp loudly. So she was trying to make the best out of her scenario with a slightly intimidating blonde. She believed she could use this fight to her advantage. By defeating an ex-villain, her draft worth would tremendously increase, resulting in heavy offers and fame. Such a treat for beating someone who hid their quirk because it probably wasn't the strongest was an amazing chance for her. She may be not one of the smartest tools in the shed, but her physical attributes were her strong points. Villains usually neglected things like that, working in the shadows and all. Now he was operating in hero's space. In the light, he'd struggle against someone like her. A rather loud escapade of shouts broke the girl's stretching routine. Coming in from the other side of the center stage was her opponent, with his hands in his pockets. His stoic face made her frown. People should be happy to compete in a setting like this. The sports festival was very serious, yet it was supposed to be fun too. He looked to have digested, either. Oh. Match 5 is underway. Give it up for the lovely pink hero student, Mina Ashido, from 1A. She threw up peace signs, acknowledging the applauding fans and heroes, and the challenger from Mustafu. UA's very own villain hero, Naruto Uzumaki from Gen Ed. Present mic hollered, but instead of cheers, a deafening silence reigned. The heroes and fans looked around confusingly at each other. Did he just say villain hero? Aizawa in the booth took his chance to take over. Seeing the disturbing quiet of the crowd, Uzumaki is an ex-villain who was recommended to UA for rehabilitation after being detained under the law. He said monotonously through the mic. What was meant to calm the crowd down only led to unbridled detraction. A villain in UA? They reward criminals with that now. Unbelievable. I was just cheering for someone who fiends on terrorizing our livelihoods. Think about it though, He's under surveillance by the staff and All Might. There's no way he could do anything. Everyone deserves a second chance. It's not right to treat a kid like this. The reactions were mixed. Some saw the reasoning behind it, while others were blinded by their fear. On-duty heroes made their way towards the ensuing chaos that had erupted within the crowd. All of it centered around the Uzumaki. Something needed to happen soon before things turned violent. The heroes turned their head towards the top 10 hero booth in order for the symbol of peace to defuse the situation. Top 10 heroes. Ah, I see now. So that was the secret All Might. What are you going to do now? This can't continue and you're the only one who can settle an entry stadium. Number 4 hero, Best Jeanist, readied himself in case everything turns south. I see why you did it, but what does it prove? Are we still missing parts of the story here? Shield hero, Crust questioned the burly blonde hero. The number 3 hero, Hawks, was standing directly to All Might's left. The man was definitely not hesitant to go down. It looked as if he was listening to others for their opinion on the matter first. He didn't envy the number 1 position. Everyone looked at him for the answers. But even as strong as he was, All Might was still human. That pressure could destroy someone if they didn't handle it correctly, and he had seen before with Endeavor. I knew there was something odd about Uzumaki. Just because he was a villain, doesn't mean he was doing it of his own will. There are many situations for us heroes in which we've seen all types of villainy. For all we know, Uzumaki was trying to feed his family by his own accord. The red-winged hero added his own advice. The knowing looks he received had eased the tension tremendously. All Might nodded vigorously at Kigo's comment. To keep it brief, although close, Naruto has no family. Young Uzumaki is an orphan who was dropped from the governmental program for orphans when he turned 12. He lived in poverty doing odd jobs for sketchy people and ended up running with questionable people. He was just surviving, the best way he could. Desperation attracts vultures who prey on defeated people like young Uzumaki. Now please understand, he is a victim of circumstance, not the other way around. The usual bellowing voice of All Might was quiet now. Downcast looks from the heroes drew upon the boy who stood stagnant. He had yet to react, as if he was used to such venom from strangers. I will be going now. Ha ha! The man exploded out of his seat in a massive lunge. The crowd noticeably quieted at the sight of the overly huge man crashing down in the middle of the arena. Always one for dramatics. I bet Endeavor is pissed beyond belief. Him taking over and all, Mirko said, still visibly upset at the scenario unfolding, but trying to crack a small joke. Kigo knew Endeavor was pissed. His son not using his fire and now this. Yeah, no way he wasn't. Center stage. Midnight handed her mic off to the towering man, who gave her a blinding smile in return. The way the crowd was going at Naruto-kun was really pissing her off. They knew nothing about him, yet they judged him so quickly. Just the things she was hearing disgusted her. The boy looked far from defeated, but seeing him stand there, taking on everything alone, filled her with sadness. Such mental strength to stand his ground and not run away from this obvious negative feedback to his past mistakes was a message in itself. She wanted him to run away, to not take people's shit, to say something. However, for the little time she had known him, Naruto spoke with his actions rather than his words. He still hadn't fought, and he was settled in the lapse of proving himself. She knew he had a message for those that doubted his willpower, so it gave her some comfort shortly. Hello Japan. Do not fret over the rumors you hear. Young Uzumaki is here to stay and his resolve to be a hero is one of the strongest I've seen in this generation. Do not judge over the prejudice villains have displayed in the best. Judge young Uzumaki on how well he can serve Japan in the future as a hero. Being an ex-villain changes nothing. If you don't trust him yet, then trust my word when I say, Uzumaki will prove himself to you. The one for all hero echoed throughout the UA stadium. Naruto Uzumaki is a UA student, my student. Treat him with the respect he deserves. By coming to UA, he has already shown his resolve to serve Japan as a civil protector, villain or hero. As long as he saves lives along the way, he is a proud student of mine. Plus ultra! The 8th successor bellowed loudly, even with a shorter speech. The defining qualities of All Might seemed to cause a sudden reflection amongst the fans. Many looked to All Might as their savior, many on the verge of god worship, but even a few lines could stir the most angered fans. The true power of the number 1 hero was not strength, but absolute conviction to those who couldn't protect themselves. Those tend to forget frequently. Japan doesn't serve All Might. No, The #1 hero serves the country of Japan as their last line of defense. There was some reluctance, but when the shouts of approval came filtering in resounding waves, the entire crowd was washed away with thunderous encouragement. Show us what you got, villain hero. If All Might says he can, then let's see it. You can do it. We believe All Might. Plus Ultra. Damn him. I can't believe he can sound so convincing. Is he steaming? All Might's so strong that sweat evaporates off him. To Japan. Mina was beginning to shrink in on herself. Whatever confidence she had was now completely decimated with the entire stadium now praising the person they just fussed over. Looking at the blonde who began to raise his head, she expected to see tears or a smiling face. No, his face was blistered venomously with determination. His eyes zeroed in on her form, making her feel small and hopeless. The lazy slouch disappeared, replaced by veteran of combat, waiting for the beginning of the fight. She felt as if she had already lost. Wow! Naruto Uzumaki has gone from the most hated to the most loved in 10 minutes. What an unbelievable sight to behold! Present Mike exclaimed, trying his best to commentate over the roaring crowd. As a last attempt to confide sportsmanship to her opponent, Mina said, I hope to have a good match as equals Uzumaki-san. Finishing with a smile, she waited for his response. I do as well, but I'm afraid we aren't equals, the blonde stoically concluded. The smile upon Ashido's face disintegrated. Midnight took the mic back from the #1 hero, who had stylishly returned to his section. Fighters ready, go. Ashido shot sideways in an arc, getting a feel for her opponent by attacking long range. Her battle IQ was better than her book smarts, so hopefully this allowed her some insight on the unknowns of the blonde. Globs of acid sang truly through the air as she released her pent-up tension upon the still-masked blonde. Naruto dodged all the globs easily, weaving through them all without unprecedented fluency. The masked blonde's face remained flat and unmoving through it all. He was going to end this quickly. For Naruto, this was no drawn-out game of skills. No, he was meant to be cutthroat. No mercy. Bansho Tenin, he extended his hand in her direction. A booming ping of anti-gravity split the air, scratching the counteracting forces like a buzzsaw. His newest ability allowed him to teleport things to him, although it was slower than his instant flash in which he enacted on himself, being in objects that weren't on his person, were harder to attract to himself. Therefore, the drawback was a force that acted like anti-gravity and pulled alive constituents and objects at 40 miles per hour towards himself. Even Aizawa had never seen him enact this move. It was powerful, but still the weakest in his arsenal. That went to show how strong he was without using the main components of his quirk. Bansho Tenin Naruto sound effect. Whoa! Ashido is being pulled off her feet. What is that? The voice quirk user grabbed his head in disbelief at the ability. Mina kept up her ruthless attack with no effect. It was so frustrating. Maybe it was better to battle him up close. Her hand-to-hand combat was her strongest quality after all. Suddenly, she lost control in her body as she began to hover for a split second. Her entire form was sent spiraling towards the blonde's outstretched hand. I can't move. What is going on? The acid quirk user approached, getting dangerously close to the boy. Grinning under his mask, Naruto pulled back his hand and lifted his right leg to begin an axe kick upon her paralyzed form. Calculating her speed upon arrival, he twirled effortlessly, and connected a devastating boot to her jaw, sending her straight towards the side boundary. Mina watched helplessly as Naruto closed in upon her face with his foot. She closed her eyes and hoped for the best. What a vicious kick! The ooze of crowd enacted at once, seeing the girl's head snap with the calamitous heel connection. The worst pain she felt since becoming a hero instantaneously met her jaw. Spitting blood out of her mouth, she tried to fight the enclosing darkness, but nevertheless, it overtook and claimed her body. The horned girl flew through the air. It was evident that she was unconscious as her form was limp, hitting the concrete with a roll and sprawled out limbs crossing the inevitable white line. Midnight and Cementos nodded to each other. In 10 seconds the fight was over. It was a no contest and the most vicious in approach of the day. Winner by incapacitation. Naruto Uzumaki. Impossibly, the crowd erupted in pure unbristled entertainment. It was one of the moments which lived on for years in people's memories. The unforgettable roar of the crowd, the pure adrenaline running through countless veins. Once again, the blonde stole the show. That wasn't even aimed for him in the first place. Just as I expected, Hopefully there are better combatists. Naruto turned towards the 1A student section and stared down his potential opponents. Has this turned into the event of the year? It's now the Hero Students vs. Japan's Uzumaki. Yeah, 1A and 1B looked back upon the blonde, putting his hands back in his pockets. All felt a tremendous amount of sweat drip from their bodies. It was another declaration of war, but this time, their opponent was out for heads. In a blink of an eye, an ex-villain rallied an entire country behind him due to the indirect efforts of the number one hero. Elsewhere, Uzumaki? So that's where you've been. A man with light blue hair scratched viciously at his neck as he watched the blonde conclude his first round fight.